Chapter 1561. Ji Tianqing had once read over 300,000 books in the Divine Book Pavilion. Naturally, he could recognize that the tens of thousands of black crows that covered the sky were the blue-winged birds. Every blue-winged bird had the strength of a heavenly origin realm cultivator. When tens of thousands of blue-winged birds formed a formation, they were extremely powerful. As for the 100-meter-long purple bird, it was a high-rank spirit beast, the heavenly astral drifting cloud beast. Its strength had reached the 4th level of the primordial soul realm. However, that was nothing to be afraid of. What he was truly afraid of was the black-robed man standing on the back of the heavenly astral drifting cloud beast. That person was 6 feet tall, thin and short. His face was as black as charcoal and was filled with pits and scars. His eyes were like an eagle's, extremely sharp and contained an ice-cold chill. His strength had already surpassed the primordial soul realm and reached the tribulation realm. As for how many tribulations he had, Ji Tianqing could not tell at that moment. He looked coldly at the black-robed man and shouted, "Who are you? Why are you blocking my path?" The black-robed man sneered and said coldly, "I'm Hei. As for why I'm trying to kill you, you already know the answer." The words "already know the answer" allowed Ji Tianqing to guess the other party's intentions. Obviously, it was for the burial of Heaven's sword. He secretly accumulated his magic power and prepared to strike at any time. He asked again, "Are you from the Blue Dragon Empire? So what if I am?" Hei stared coldly at him and said with disdain, "You're about to die, yet you still have so much nonsense to say." As he spoke, he waved his wide sleeves and shot out a black light that covered the sky. Instantly, several tens of thousands of blue-winged birds spread out in all directions, like a huge black canopy that enveloped an area of 20 kilometers. A domain formed by the black crows and the black light sealed the area within 20 miles. The formless power of the domain suppressed Ji Tianqing and the black dragon. The black dragon could not bear the pressure and fell from the sky, about to crash into the forest below. Ji Tianqing's aura instantly exploded. Golden light surged out of his body and spread out in all directions. The golden light that filled the sky formed a golden sword, and the purple lightning interweaved into a net. The two combined to form the divine lightning sword domain. The two domains overlapped and clashed fiercely. The pressure on Black Dragon was greatly reduced, and only then did he stabilize himself. "Hee, you do have some ability. No wonder you can live until now." Hei sneered coldly. He suddenly waved both of his palms, shooting out a monstrous purple light towards Ji Tianqing. Soul-searching claw. The dazzling purple light condensed into a pair of massive eagle claws, carrying with it the power to tear apart one's divine sense as they hurtled toward Ji Tianqing. Ji Tianqing's expression did not change. With a wave of his right hand, the black dragon rapidly shrank and turned into a 3-foot-long black dragon sword. His left hand formed a sword seal while his right hand brandished the black dragon sword. He used all his strength to display his secret sword technique. 7-star sword. Dazzling golden light burst forth from the black dragon's sword as it instantly slashed out 7 sword projections over 3 kilometers in length toward the 2 soul-trapping claws. Pung pung pung. With a series of muffled sounds, the 7 sword lights exploded on the spot. One of the 2 soul-trapping claws was also shattered, turning into purple light fragments that scattered in the dark sky. The other soul-trapping claw, however, hit Ji Tianqing squarely. Pung! Ji Tianqing was sent flying on the spot, rolling toward the edge of the domain. Suddenly, thousands of pitch-black blue-winged birds pounced on him like evil spirits, releasing sharp black blades that covered the sky, enveloping his figure. Ji Tianqing's magical power shield was shattered, and he had no choice but to use the Kenshin battle robe, turning it into a pair of golden wings to protect himself. The endless black blades blasted the golden wings, but they were all shattered. This ugly monster's strength is at least above the 2nd level of the tribulation stage. After the 2 sides exchanged a blow, Ji Tianqing roughly guessed the opponent's strength and realm, and his mood was very solemn. At this moment, Hei took the opportunity to attack again. He waved his palms and sent out 2 giant purple blades that were thousands of feet long, slashing toward Ji Tianqing. The celestial wind-flowing cloud beast also opened its mouth and spat out purple flames that covered the sky and earth, pouring down like a flood. Ji Tianqing was in danger, and his expression was cold as he channeled all of his power, slashing out 1,000 feet long blazing white sword light. Moon-breaking sword. the sixth move of the Burial of Heaven's 9 Swords, Moon-Breaking Sword. After mastering this sword technique, this was the first time he used it against an enemy. Boom! The 3 giant sword lights collided fiercely, exploding with a thunderous sound. The moon-breaking sword and the 2 giant purple blades shattered on the spot. Ji Tianqing was sent flying, crashing into the edge of the domain, and his figure was drowned by tens of thousands of blue-winged birds. The monstrous purple flames also tightly wrapped around him, burning his body and essence soul. At the critical moment, he once again used his golden wings to protect his body, blocking the purple flames and the blue-winged bird's attack. Damn it, I used the most powerful moon-breaking sword, but I can't hurt him at all. It's impossible to defeat him. I can only wait for an opportunity to escape. Ji Tianqing realized that Black Wing was too strong, and he had almost no chance of winning. He could only think of a way to escape Black Wing's pursuit. However, Black Wing was determined to win. His attacks were endless and did not stop at all. Just as these thoughts flashed through his mind, Black Wing and the celestial wind-flowing cloud beast had already unleashed a torrential storm of attacks. He was instantly beaten back, and he was exhausted from defending. Soon, 10 breaths of time passed. Both sides exchanged more than 10 moves, and Black Wing and the celestial wind-flowing cloud beast's attacks became fiercer and fiercer, and the power of their Dharma spells also became stronger. Ji Tianqing's golden wings had blocked more than 10 attacks, and their power was too great, and they had already become dim. Once the power of the golden wings was exhausted, it would be very difficult for him to block Black Wing's wild attacks. In this situation, he was filled with anger and anxiety, and a thought flashed through his mind. Black Wing is too strong, and it's almost impossible for me to hurt him. I can only use the celestial wind-flowing cloud beast as a breakthrough. After making up his mind, he used his wings to protect himself and forcefully blocked the 2 balls of black light that Black Wing blasted at him. Taking advantage of this opportunity, he swung his sword at the celestial wind-flowing cloud beast with all his might. Heaven-splitting sword. He held the black dragon sword with both hands and slashed out a 3-kilometer-long holy sword light, mixed with dazzling purple lightning arcs. Bang! The giant sword shattered the purple light that filled the sky on the spot and slashed the celestial wind-flowing cloud beast. Amidst a deafening loud noise, its huge 100-meter-long body was split in half by the sword. Purple blood splattered everywhere, and countless feathers and broken bones scattered. Chirp! The celestial wind-flowing cloud beast let out an angry cry, and its corpse fell toward the ruins below. A dark purple essence soul flew out of the corpse and fled to the edge of the domain. Ji Tianqing was already prepared. He immediately opened the third eye on his forehead and released endless divine lightning, blasting at the essence soul of the celestial wind-flowing cloud beast. Lightning! A 1,000-foot-long lightning beam tore through the dark sky and struck the purple essence soul. Boom! With a thunderous roar, the essence soul was blasted to smithereens by the lightning beam, completely destroyed. The celestial wind-flowing cloud beast at the 3rd firmament essence, soul realm, could not withstand Ji Tianqing's killer move at all. It was instantly killed. Chapter 1562. Black Wing was originally confident that he could kill Ji Tianqing within 100 breaths of time and obtain the Burial of Heaven's sword. However, he did not expect Ji Tianqing's strength to be so extraordinary that he could instantly kill his mount. When he came back to his senses, it was too late for him to save it. Seeing the heavenly astral flowing cloud beast being instantly killed with his own eyes, his eyes were red with anger, and a murderous aura surged from his body. Ji Tianqing, you damned bastard, I'm going to tear you apart and let you die without a burial ground. Black Wing roared with a ferocious expression, and his tone was extremely cold and vicious. He waved his palms with all his might and continuously struck out more than 30 palm shadows, which slammed towards Ji Tianqing like a storm. Each palm shadow was the size of a millstone and contained the power to destroy heaven and earth. Ji Tianqing hurriedly used the divine concealment step and quickly teleported to dodge. However, he was trapped in the domain and could not dodge Black Wing's ferocious attacks at all. Very quickly, he was hit by a few palm shadows. Bam! 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 A series of muffled sounds exploded, and Ji Tianqing was sent flying backward, crashing heavily onto the edge of the domain. The power of the golden wings was exhausted, and they automatically retracted into his body. The shield that he condensed with his dermic powers was extremely weak in front of Black Wing. It could not withstand a single blow and was instantly smashed into pieces. In just a short breath, he was hit 7 times in a row. No matter how strong his physical defense was, he could not withstand such a fierce attack. His face was pale, and blood spurted out of his mouth and nose. There were more than a dozen fractures all over his body. His hair was disheveled, and his clothes were ragged. He looked rather pathetic. Thousands of blue-winged birds immediately surrounded him and pecked at his body crazily. There was also a black light that was as black as ink, which formed thousands of sharp blades that ruthlessly strangled him. In this critical moment, he also erupted with endless potential and sacrificed his Essence Soul Golden Sword. Swoosh! The 1,000-feet-tall Essence Soul Golden Sword surged out from the top of his head, releasing a dazzling golden light. At least 3,000-plus blue-winged birds were torn into pieces by the peerlessly violent sword chi, transforming into a large rain of minced meat and blood that scattered throughout the sky. At this moment, Hei brandished his fists again and used an ultimate move. He charged over with a domineering aura. Purple light gushed out from his body, and his body expanded to over 100 feet tall, turning him into a giant. On his huge fists, purple light condensed into a huge fist aura, bursting forth with a power that could destroy everything, and smashed towards Ji Tianqing. Ji Tianqing's expression was solemn. His body lit up with dazzling golden light, and he instantly merged with the golden sword. White Tiger Sacred Sword. After becoming one with the sword, the giant golden sword unleashed a destructive power that slashed toward Black Wing. The dazzling golden light formed the shadow of a white tiger, exuding an unstoppable murderous aura, enough to make anyone tremble in fear. Boom! In the next moment, the white tiger sacred sword and Black Wing's fists fiercely collided, exploding with a thunderous sound. The incomparably violent impact spread out in all directions along with the golden and purple light, like a brilliant and dazzling storm. Black Wing's 2-fist auras collapsed on the spot, and he was sent flying back 100 feet. However, the white tiger sacred sword exploded with a bang. The white tiger phantom immediately dissipated, leaving behind only a dim primordial spirit golden sword that was sent flying back. Whoosh! The golden sword stabbed into the black light domain, instantly killing hundreds of blue-winged birds, and piercing a large hole in the black light domain. Ji Tianqing's figure appeared. His hair was disheveled, his face was covered in blood, and his body was hunched over. His aura was extremely chaotic. Without a doubt, his golden sword was injured, and his battle prowess was greatly weakened. A tribulation-passing realm martial lord is actually so powerful. He muttered with a face full of hatred, and his heart was filled with anger and indignation. Unfortunately, he was only at the 5th level of the Essence Soul Realm. If he could reach the 8th or 9th level of the Essence Soul Realm, he might be able to fight Black Wing. But from the looks of it, he had no other choice but to escape. At that moment, Black Wing was not going to let him off after gaining the upper hand. He charged over ferociously. "Little bastard, it's time for you to die. Die!" Black Wing shouted angrily. He raised his palms high, and dazzling purple light condensed into 2 huge light blades, and slashed at Ji Tianqing. Ji Tianqing was forced into a corner, and he could not resist Black Wing's attack. He could only use his trump card, God-slaying Spear. He suddenly raised his left palm and released all the divine flames that he had stored for several months in one go. Whoosh! The endless divine flames condensed into a 30-feet-long divine spear. It exploded with an invincible power and stabbed at Black Wing. At that moment, the domineering and murderous intent in Black Wing's eyes dissipated. What replaced it was shock and intense fear. He could clearly sense that the god-slaying spear contained a terrifying power that could threaten his life. He instinctively wanted to withdraw his palms to avoid the attack of the divine spear. But he had already rushed to within 1,000 feet of Ji Tianqing. It was too late for him to dodge. Bang! Amidst a deafening boom, the god-slaying spear shattered the 2 giant blades of purple light and pierced into his chest. His physical body, which had gone through 2 heavenly tribulations, had extremely powerful strength and defense. Even so, the mysterious and powerful god-slaying spear still pierced a bloody hole the size of a millstone in his chest. The flesh and blood around the wound, as well as the bones in the wound, were all burned to ashes by the divine flames. Black Wing's expression changed drastically. He raised his head and let out a painful wail. His entire body trembled. The god-slaying spear pierced through his body and flew for more than 10 miles before it hit the black light domain. With a muffled bang, a huge hole was created in the black light domain. Thousands of blue-winged birds were killed instantly. While Black Wing was severely injured and roaring in pain, Ji Tianqing made a prompt decision to teleport away. Phew! He passed through the hole like a stream of light and escaped the seal of the black light domain. After flying out of the domain, the pressure on him was greatly reduced. Light was restored to his surroundings. But he did not dare to rest, nor did he have time to catch his breath. He immediately took out an Essence Soul Dermic sword and rode it into the sky, rushing in the direction of the God-tier lake. A few seconds later, Black Wing removed the black light domain and roared as he charged out. As he circulated his energy to suppress his injuries, his body transformed into a purple beam of light. He streaked across the sky like lightning and pursued Ji Tianqing. However, his injuries were too severe. His organs were severely injured. Half of his heart had been destroyed by the god-slaying spear. The millstone-sized hole could not be healed in a short period of time. His dermic powers were rapidly weakening, causing his flying speed to be slower than usual. As for Ji Tianqing's sword kinesis flight, his speed was comparable to a 9th-level Essence Soul Realm expert. He was truly as fast as lightning. Both parties chased each other high in the sky. In 8 hours, they had flown 50,000 miles. In the beginning, Black Wing was still able to maintain a short distance from Ji Tianqing. But later on, he could no longer see Ji Tianqing. Chapter 1563. 10 hours later. It was the darkest moment before dawn. Within a vast and desolate mountain range, Ji Tianqing was hiding within a mountain peak, and he was meditating within a cave to regulate his breathing. Previously, he had engaged in a fierce battle with Black Wing and continued to flee for 8 hours. Now, he was exhausted and his magic power was almost depleted. Moreover, his essence soul had been injured by Black Wing and was very weak. He had finally escaped from Black Wing's pursuit, so he had to find a place to hide and recuperate. He took out 5 essence soul elixirs from his interspatial ring and consumed them one by one. Then he started to refine the elixirs. These elixirs were taken from the secret room in the Heaven Saint Palace. He carried them with him in case he needed them. Soon, the essence soul elixirs were refined and had strong medicinal effects. His essence soul was slowly recovering, and his magic power was also gradually recovering. As time passed, his complexion slowly recovered, and he was finally out of his weakened state. While he was recuperating, he was also thinking. Previously, it was the White Knight Empire and Thousand Snow Empire who tried to snatch the Sword of Burial of Heaven. Now, I've only left Mount God Bestowment for 2 days, and I've been attacked by Black Wing from the Blue Dragon Empire. Even the Blue Dragon Empire knows my name and the news about the Sword of Burial of Heaven. Looks like the news about the Sword of Burial of Heaven has already spread to the various countries. Every country wants to take the Sword of Burial of Heaven for themselves. He was very clear that he was like a piece of fat meat now, and the 6 countries were like hungry wolves. Surrounded by wolves, his situation would only become more and more dangerous. He had already made up his mind. After the God-tier lake incident was over, he would return to Mount God Bestowment and would not leave easily. To him, only Mount God Bestowment was relatively safe. 2 days later, Ji Tianqing's essence soul was 80% recovered, and his magic power was fully recovered. He left the cave and rode the black dragon to continue his journey. The next 2 days were peaceful and smooth, and he did not encounter any obstacles. On the morning of the 3rd day, he finally arrived at God-tier Lake. At this time, the sun had risen and golden sunlight shone down. The black dragon soared in the sky. Ji Tianqing stood on its back and gazed into the distance. Hundreds of miles away, there was a vast mountain range. A sparkling and translucent lake was quietly hidden among the majestic mountains. Looking down from the sky, the God's Tier Lake with a radius of 300 miles really looked like a teardrop. Early in the morning, the mountains were shrouded in mist, obscuring the God's Tier Lake. The black dragon headed straight for the Divine Tier Lake, but it was blocked by an invisible barrier 100 miles away from the lake. It had no choice but to stop in the sky and look around. Ji Tianqing used his Dharma eyes to carefully observe the sky in front of him. Only then did he discover that the invisible barrier was a heaven and earth grand array. This formation covered a radius of 500 miles, protecting the entire God Tier Lake. With his strength and attainments in array formations, It was impossible for him to break this saint-level array. Unless he entered the Heavenly Sutra Pavilion and read up on the books related to array formations, he would not be able to find a way to break it. However, he did not plan to do so. If he broke the formation without permission, he would definitely offend the god's Tyr Island Lord. He kept the black dragon into the sword world and stood in the sky. He bowed towards the god Tyr Lake and shouted with a booming voice, God Bestowment Mountain's disciple Ji Tianqing is here to pay a visit to the god Tyr Island Lord. The rolling sound waves in the sky traveled hundreds of miles away. It was enough for the people in the god Tyr Lake to hear. He waited for a moment and saw a dazzling light figure speeding over from the god Tyr Lake. Swish! In the blink of an eye, that green flowing light arrived 200 feet away from him and stopped in midair. The green light receded, revealing a tall figure. It was a middle-aged man wearing a green robe. His hair was tied up in a bun, and he carried an ancient sword with cloud patterns on his back. This person had a thin face and clear eyes. His every movement emitted an indifferent aura that only a hermit would have. He looked at Ji Tianqing with a calm gaze. After sizing him up, he said with an indifferent tone, Could it be that you don't know that the god Tyr Lake is a forbidden area and that my island lord doesn't meet guests as he pleases? Ji Tianqing cupped his hands and bowed. He said with a calm expression, It's because I know that I formally pay a visit and request for an audience. May I know how to address this senior? The green-robed man looked at him expressionlessly. After a moment of silence, he said, I am Jian Shursan. I am the island lord's servant. Ji Tianqing nodded and addressed him as Senior Jian Shursan. The indifferent look in Jian Shursan's eyes faded a little. He said, May I know your name, and why have you come to the god Tyr Lake to seek an audience with the island lord? Ji Tianqing explained, My name is Tianqing. I heard that the god Tyr Lake has a miraculous effect that can resolve the obsessions in one's heart. When I saw the person I love, I specially came from God Bestowment Mountain to seek an audience. Hearing him say this, Jian Shursan nodded slightly and said, No wonder you came to the god Tyr Lake from afar. Such a reason is in line with the rules set by the island lord. However, the island lord doesn't like to be disturbed when he cultivates in the lake. Not everyone can see him. The island lord has set up a 7 stars heavenly barrier. If you insist on seeking an audience, you'll have to pass through the 7 stars heavenly barrier first. 7 stars heavenly barrier? Ji Tianqing frowned. A trace of doubt flashed in his eyes. Senior Jian Shursan, please tell me what's going on. Jian Shursan waved his sleeve and shot out a dazzling green light. It opened a door on the invisible barrier in front of him. Come with me. With that, Jian Shursan turned and flew towards the god Tyr Lake. Ji Tianqing hurriedly passed through the door and followed behind him. They crossed 2 mountains and flew to the god Tyr Lake. The 2 of them descended from the sky and landed on the shore of the god Tyr Lake. Only then did Ji Tianqing see clearly. On the surface of the lake that was as clear as a mirror, there were 7 balls of light of different colors floating. They were like 7 lanterns. Every ball of light was the size of a house. They emitted dazzling light like stars in the night sky. The 7 balls of light were arranged vertically, extending from the shore to the center of the lake. In the center of the lake, there was a small dark green island covered by clouds. Seeing this scene, Ji Tianqing immediately understood. That island was the god Tyr Island. If he wanted to ascend the god Tyr Island and seek an audience with the island lord, he had to cross the 7 balls of light. Jian Shursan stood beside him and reminded with an indifferent expression, the 7 stars heavenly barrier contains boundless mysteries. If you want to successfully pass through it, not only do you need great strength, you also need great wisdom. I'll remind you that it's best to think carefully before making a decision. After all, there were many Tribulation Realm martial lords who were unable to pass through the 7 stars heavenly barrier. They even suffered heavy injuries and left in a sorry state. Ji Tianqing nodded to show that he understood. He said with a firm tone, Senior, thank you for your reminder. No matter what, I will pass through the 7 barriers and successfully ascend the god Tyr Island. Jian Shursan raised his eyebrows and a playful smile appeared on his face. Chapter 1564. Jian Shursan's tone was calm and certain. There was no sarcasm in it. He was just stating a fact. Ji Tianqing frowned slightly and did not say anything. Jian Shursan did not understand him. Even if he argued with him, it would be useless. He stepped across the water surface and flew 5 kilometers away in a flash, landing on the first ball of light. Swoosh! The dark golden ball of light immediately lit up with a dazzling golden light and swallowed his figure. He only saw a blur in front of his eyes, and then he entered a dark alternate space. He was surrounded by a pitch-black void. There was only a path condensed from golden light beneath his feet that led to the depths of the void ahead. Just as he was looking around and observing carefully, Jian Shisan's voice entered his mind. This is the first stage, the 10,000-sword heavenly barrier. You have to walk along the path to the end within 100 breaths before you can successfully pass it. Ji Tianqing immediately understood what was going on. He could also guess that the golden path beneath his feet must have been set up with ambushes and traps to serve as a test. Indeed, after he walked 10 steps along the path, hundreds of dark golden sword lights appeared in the void on his left and right. They slashed down with violent might. Swoosh! 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 The power of each sword light was comparable to the full-powered attack of a 4th-level Essence Soul expert. More than 300 sword lights slashed down at the same time, drowning his figure and about to chop him into meat paste. It seemed that he had no other choice but to take it head-on. But just as the sword lights were about to hit him, he suddenly disappeared. In the next moment, he appeared out of thin air 10 kilometers away and teleported to the depths of the void. When his figure appeared, thousands of golden swords appeared in the void on both sides and shot at him like a rain of arrows. However, he used the divine concealment step again and teleported 20 miles away, narrowly dodging the sword light. Next, his figure flickered 3 more times. Each time, he could easily avoid the sword light's attacks. When he teleported 50 kilometers away, he had already reached the end of the void and successfully passed the 10,000-sword heavenly barrier. From the time he entered this stage to the time he successfully passed it, it only took 5 breaths. Swoosh! With a flash of light, he appeared above the lake and continued to fly toward the second ball of light. Jian Shisan, who was standing on the shore, clearly saw the scene of Ji Tianqing breaking through. He frowned slightly. His expression was a little startled as he muttered, "In the 10,000-sword heavenly fortress, there were originally 20 different attacks, a total of over 10,000 sword lights. This brat's movement technique was so brilliant. He actually used 5 teleportations and easily passed the first stage. How unexpected. As expected of a disciple of Godseal Mountain." He put away his contempt and looked at Ji Tianqing with interest. "The second stage is the Avalon of 5 elements," he muttered to himself. "He'll probably have to put in a lot of effort and waste half a day." As soon as he finished speaking, Ji Tianqing landed on the second 5-colored dazzling light. Shwa! Light flashed in front of his eyes, and he entered an alternate space. This space was a small world with a radius of tens of thousands of miles. Under his feet was a green grassland, surrounded by tall mountains, lakes, and rivers. The spiritual qi of heaven and earth in the air was very rich. Before he could see the scenery of this space clearly, danger suddenly descended. The earth trembled violently, and a huge crack appeared. Countless earthy yellow fairies and rock monsters emerged from the ground and pounced toward him in groups. Hundreds and thousands of dark green fairies emerged from the grassland and forests, charging forward without regard for their own safety. In addition, balls of fire fell from the sky and turned into flaming fairies. Ice-blue water-type fairies and water demons emerged from the rivers and lakes, attacking him from all sides. The power of the 5 elements in heaven and earth condensed into fairies of different forms, surging forward like a tide. Ji Tianqing's figure was immediately submerged, and he endured the siege of over 10,000 fairies. Each of the fairies had the strength of the spirit refinement realm. When over 10,000 fairies gathered together, their power was terrifying. If Ji Tianqing fought with the fairies, he would definitely spend a lot of time, and his magic power would be severely depleted. However, he quickly understood the mystery of this stage and thought of a way to break through. He cast spells on the spot and quickly set up a 5 elements great formation. After the great formation with a radius of 10,000 feet was activated, it lit up with dazzling 5-colored brilliance, spinning rapidly like a vortex. Once the 10,000 fairies came into contact with the 5 elements great formation, they quickly dissolved and disintegrated. The power of the 5 elements restrained each other. The water-type fairies were restrained by the earth elemental power, while the wood-type fairies were restrained by the metal elemental power. Ji Tianqing controlled the great formation and was always able to eliminate the fairies appropriately. In a short span of 100 breaths, the 10,000 fairies were completely devoured by the Great Formation, turning into surging five elements spiritual qi. Ji Tianqing removed the five elements Great Formation and devoured the majestic power of the five elements. His magic power was also restored to its peak state. Amidst the ruins, a five-colored light door appeared. Ji Tianqing stepped into it and left the avalon of five elements. He returned to the air above the lake and continued to fly to the third stage without stopping. On the shore, Jian Shisan was already frowning, his eyes flickering with shock and suspicion. This kid actually used 100 breaths to clear the avalon of five elements? Most people would use all their strength to kill the five elements fairies and spend a few hours to clear it. Could it be that he received guidance from an expert and already knew the way to clear it? Thinking of this, he stared at Ji Tianqing's back view and thought to himself, "Let me observe him again and see how he clears the third stage." That's the Blazing Flame Heavenly Pass. Even someone at the 9th level of the Essence Soul Realm would have to suffer a lot to be able to clear it. At the same time, Ji Tianqing landed on the third ball of light, and his figure was swallowed by the dark red light. Swoosh! With a flash of brilliance, he appeared in the Blazing Flame Heavenly Pass. In front of him was a lava lake with a radius of 100 miles. The lava in the lake surged, and the surface of the lake was covered with thick scarlet fire. The surroundings were pitch-black void. In the entire space, other than the lava lake, there was nothing else. Ji Tianqing stood beside the lava lake, enduring the extreme heat as he stared at the lava lake and observed it carefully. He frowned and was considering how to clear this stage. Jian Shisan was using the Eye of Mystic Arts to clearly see the scene in the Blazing Flame Heavenly Pass. He stared at Ji Tianqing and thought to himself, "There's only one lava lake in the Blazing Flame Heavenly Pass. The exit of this stage is in the deepest part of the lake. Essence Soul Realm warriors are unable to withstand the might of the lava lake and can only use array formations to isolate the lava lake to find the exit. I want to see how this kid will clear this stage." At this moment, he suddenly saw Ji Tianqing step into the lava lake. In the blink of an eye, Ji Tianqing was swallowed by the lava lake. Chapter 1565. Seeing this scene, Jian Shisan was stunned. His eyes flashed with disbelief. "It seems that I guessed wrong. This kid did not receive guidance from an expert and does not know the real solution. He actually used such a stupid method to find the exit in the magma lake. However, he is only at the 5th level of the Essence Soul Realm. How can he resist the burning of the magma?" In Jian Shisan's opinion, even a 9th level Essence Soul Realm cultivator would find it difficult to resist the high temperature and burning of the magma. It was not ordinary magma, but the liquid from the Earth's core personally set up by the island master. The temperature was over 10,000 degrees, enough to melt an Essence Soul Realm treasure. With Ji Tianqing's strength, he actually dared to dive into the magma lake to find the exit. He was definitely courting death. Jian Shisan thought that even if Ji Tianqing was lucky enough to succeed, he would definitely be heavily injured and his vitality would be greatly damaged. However, he soon realized that he was wrong. After a few dozen breaths, Ji Tianqing dived into the depths of the magma lake and found the hidden exit. Whoosh! With a flash of light, he successfully passed the third stage and returned to the sky above the God-tier lake. Jian Shisan observed carefully and realized that he was safe and sound. His expression was calm and his aura was stable. He seemed to be at ease and very relaxed. How is this possible? That kid's physical defense is actually so strong? He furrowed his brows and looked at Ji Tianqing with a complicated gaze. He felt that he could not see through this kid. At the same time, Ji Tianqing turned around and looked at him. He glanced at him indifferently before continuing to fly towards the 4th stage. Jian Shisan frowned in displeasure and laughed in his heart. Previously, I said that he would be defeated after passing the 3rd stage at most. He must be unconvinced. Now that he has passed the first 3 stages in such a short time, he must be very proud. So, he deliberately glanced at me to show off? Haha, this kid is still too young. The 4th stage is the Divine Thunder stage. Only tribulation passing martial lords can pass it. With his 5th level Essence Soul Realm strength, even if he doesn't die after taking a few bolts of Divine Thunder, he will be left with half a breath. With these thoughts in mind, he continued to monitor Ji Tianqing's movements with his Eye of Arcana. Ji Tianqing landed on the 4th purple ball of light and immediately entered the Divine Thunder Heavenly Pass. Inside the Divine Thunder Heaven Pass, there was only a lightning pool with a radius of 10 miles, surrounded by a pitch-black void. The lightning pool was filled with a faint purple liquid that was filled with dense electric arcs. The purple water that filled the pool was called lightning liquid. It was condensed from the purest divine lightning energy. The seemingly calm lightning pool actually contained the power to destroy the heavens and earth. The power of a drop of thunder liquid was comparable to the full blow of a powerhouse in the first layer of the crossing tribulation realm. Ji Tianqing stood at the side of the lightning pool and looked at the lightning liquid. He thought to himself, this is truly inconceivable. The God Tier's Island Lord's methods are truly extraordinary. To actually be able to turn the divine lightning into lightning liquid. Coincidentally, after I left the Tianxian land, I have no place to absorb the power of the divine thunder, and cannot strengthen the power of the divine thunder sword domain. I'll gladly accept this pool full of lightning liquid. When he thought of this, a playful smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. At this moment, Jian Shisan's voice transmitted into the Divine Thunder Heaven Pass and resounded above the lightning pool. Ji Tianqing, this is the Divine Thunder Heaven Pass. The exit of this pass is hidden in the depths of the lightning pool. The method to pass this pass is the same as the previous pass. What are you still hesitating for? Hearing Jian Shisan's reminder, Ji Tianqing raised his eyebrows and the smile on the corner of his mouth became even more pronounced. He could hear that Jian Shisan's tone was somewhat mocking and urging. Haha, this guy seems to want me to jump into the lightning pool quickly. He also looks forward to seeing the scene of me being struck by the divine lightning until I wish I was dead. As this thought flashed across his mind, he stepped into the lightning pool with an indifferent expression and swam towards the center of the lightning pool. Ripples appeared on the calm lightning liquid. Instantly, lightning and thunder fire burst out from it. Above the lightning pool, dozens of purple thunderbolts immediately condensed and struck towards Ji Tianqing fiercely. Boom! Boom boom boom. Deafening thunder exploded and reverberated violently in the air above the lightning pool. Ji Tianqing's figure disappeared, as if he had been struck by divine lightning and sunk into the lightning pool. Seeing this scene, the corners of Jian Shisan's mouth curled up, and he shook his head with a chuckle. Sigh, he's still too young. Naive. As he spoke, he stepped across the lake and walked towards the fourth ball of light. He thought that Ji Tianqing had been severely injured by the divine lightning and had fainted, so he wanted to stop the formation of the Divine Thunder Heaven Pass and fish Ji Tianqing out. Then, he sent Ji Tianqing away and completed his mission. But when he flew near the fourth ball of light and cast a spell to stop the formation of the Divine Thunder Heaven Pass, he discovered that he was unable to forcefully stop it. What's going on? He frowned, revealing a puzzled expression. He hurriedly used the Eye of Secret Arts to check the scene inside the Divine Thunder Heaven Pass. He saw that the lightning pool had already returned to calm, and there was no longer the scene of divine lightning striking. However, Ji Tianqing was nowhere to be seen. It was obvious that he was hiding in the depths of the lightning pool. Jian Shisan's eyes became more and more puzzled. How can this be? If I don't cast a spell to stop the formation, the lightning pool will continue to produce divine lightning until he's struck to death. He then used the Eye of Secret Arts to check the situation inside the lightning pool. Soon, he saw that in the deepest part of the lightning pool, Ji Tianqing was sitting cross-legged at the bottom of the pool, cultivating without any injuries. Even though the lightning liquid had submerged his body, it did not cause him any harm. Furthermore, the pure lightning liquid was constantly pouring into his body and being rapidly devoured by him. Seeing this scene, Jian Shisan was dumbfounded on the spot, revealing a dumbfounded expression. Heavens! What is this kid doing? He is actually devouring the lightning liquid. This is impossible. Even I, as a 7 Tribulation Martial Lord, do not dare to wantonly devour the lightning liquid. Jian Shisan was petrified. He could not understand or accept this scene at all. He found it hard to imagine how a 5th-level Essence Soul Realm kid could control divine lightning and devour lightning liquid so crazily. In his knowledge and memory, such a thing had never happened before. This had completely subverted his understanding. After a long time, he woke up from his shock and lamented, "This kid is a freak. I have guarded the God-tier lake for 1,000 years, and this is the first time I have encountered such a strange thing. No, I have to stop him quickly. I can't let him continue devouring the lightning liquid." This was personally set up by the island master. If he destroys it, the island master will blame me. With that thought, he hurriedly cast a secret technique to stop the operation of the divine lightning heaven pass and capture Ji Tianqing. However, his secret technique failed. The divine lightning heaven pass continued to operate as usual. Ji Tianqing was still cultivating in the depths of the lightning pool, devouring the lightning liquid crazily without being disturbed or affected at all. Jian Shisan frowned anxiously. He tried all kinds of methods, but to no avail. He could only watch helplessly as the lightning liquid in the pool continued to decrease. Chapter 1566. Sword 13 stood above the lake's surface, both eyes staring fixedly at the fourth bundle of light. An entire day passed, and he watched helplessly as Ji Tianqing devoured the entire pool of lightning liquid, but he was completely unable to stop it. His expression was very ugly, already on the verge of tears. Damn brat, to actually finish the entire pool of lightning liquid. How am I going to report this to Island Master? I've guarded the divine Tear Lake for 1,000 years and have never encountered such a freak. Right then, he suddenly saw a golden light that surged into the sky light up in the lightning pool again. It turned out that it was Ji Tianqing who was sitting cross-legged at the bottom of the pool. Resplendent light surged out from all over his body, filling the entire lightning pool. In a short span of 10 breaths, the magic powers in his body underwent a drastic change, completing a qualitative leap and breakthrough. His strength realm actually also broke through the bottleneck, reaching the 6th level essence soul realm. Swoosh! Thousands of dazzling golden lights suddenly shrank back into his body, vanishing. Everything returned to calm. Ji Tianqing ended his cultivation and slowly opened his eyes, the corners of his mouth curling into a faint smile. He got up and walked towards a door of light not far away, crossing that exit and leaving the divine thunder heaven pass. Swoosh! With a flash of light, he returned above the lake's surface, appearing in front of Sword 13. Sword 13 looked at him with a complicated expression, both eyes filled with a look of disbelief. You fellow, you actually devoured a pool of lightning liquid, and even broke through realm at the last minute? How did you do it? Ji Tianqing shot a glance at him. Seeing his shocked expression, he could not help revealing a trace of a smile. Sorry for making Senior Sword wait for so long. Regarding the matter of the lightning pool, Senior Sword, please report to Island Master. This junior also could not control himself, and did not have the intention to destroy it. With that said, he took a step across the lake's surface and walked towards the 5th bundle of light. Sword 13 looked at his back view, wanting to say something, but did not know where to start. He knew very well in his heart that Ji Tianqing was absolutely not an ordinary essence soul martial artist, but a freakin' genius that only appeared once in 1,000 years. Ji Tianqing cleared the first 4 rounds so easily, and even devoured a pool of lightning liquid. No matter how one looked at it, this brat would not fall here. He had a very high chance of clearing the 7 stars heavenly barrier. Thinking of this, Jian Shisan recalled what he had said before and immediately felt his old face heat up. He felt somewhat ashamed in his heart. Sigh, I've misjudged you today. The following 5th and 6th stages were stages that tested one's strength, knowledge, and experience. But the result was just as Sword 13 expected. Ji Tianqing easily passed through. Moreover, he had only spent a short hour. Sword 13 had seen with his own eyes that many Tribulation Transcendence realm powerhouses found it difficult to pass through those 2 heavenly barriers. Even if they could break through, it would take them at least half a day. However, not only did Ji Tianqing pass through it easily, the time he spent was also extremely short. Sword 13 used the Eye of Mystic Arts to watch the process of him clearing the trial, and was already shocked to the point that he was somewhat numb. Finally, Ji Tianqing stepped onto the 7th light ball and entered the final stage. Jian Shisan watched his figure being devoured by the 7-colored light ball and thought to himself, the final emotional barrier doesn't test strength, nor does it test wisdom. But it's the most difficult hurdle. Since ancient times until now, no idea how many heroes have fallen at this hurdle. This brat is young, his talent is outstanding, and he's also so distinguished and elegant. He definitely has countless female confidants and definitely can't clear the emotional barrier. He had sufficient reason to believe that Ji Tianqing would fail at this hurdle. Even if he could clear it, he would definitely have to go through a lot of trouble too. Swoosh! A light flashed. Ji Tianqing entered an alternate space. This was a pitch black like ink void. There was nothing. He was situated in the darkness, using his eyes and divine sense to observe all directions, and did not discover any abnormalities. Strange, this hurdle is actually empty? What kind of test could it be? He raised his brows, a doubtful thought flashing across in his mind. Right at this time, a myriad of colorful lights suddenly appeared in the void. Like wisps of air currents, they surged over from all directions and tunneled into his body. He instinctively resisted somewhat, circulating his skill to resist those lights, but it was also to no avail. In a blink of an eye, a myriad of wisps of air currents entered his body. His primordial spirit immediately quieted down. Consciousness also fell into a blur. He lay quietly in the void, his soul falling into a deep slumber. And in the depths of his soul, a strange scene was currently unfolding. In a vast mountain range, there stood a myriad of towering mountain peaks. In the depths of the endless mountain peaks, there was an enormous peak that pierced the sky like clouds. It was like an enormous sword piercing the sky, and also like a heaven-supporting pillar that supported heaven and earth. This towering enormous peak occupied an area of 10,000 miles in radius, reaching a height of around 10,000 feet. Above the mountainside, it was all shrouded in white clouds and thick fog. The steep mountain walls were like cliffs. There were no plants growing on it, but rows of icicles hung on it. There was an open space with a radius of 300 miles at the peak of the mountain, like a circular platform. Dozens of palaces were located in between. Many dazzling ancient palaces formed a circle, and in the middle was a plaza with a radius of 50 miles. Rather than calling it a plaza, it was more appropriate to call it a training ground. The ground was engraved with array patterns, forming a huge array with a radius of 50 miles. In the middle of the array, there was a black stone tablet that was 10,000 feet tall. Its appearance was like an ancient giant sword. Under the giant sword, a white-robed youth was sitting cross-legged in the array. He was tall, with sharp eyebrows and bright eyes. His face was resolute and cold. His attire was very simple, only wearing a white robe and cloth shoes. His long hair was tied up with a green hairband, and there was a silver belt around his waist. But he had a domineering aura that looked down on the world and the universe. At this moment, he had just opened his eyes, revealing a puzzled expression as he looked around. Strange, wasn't I challenging the god Tier Lake? Where am I? Without a doubt, this white-robed youth was Ji Tianqing. He looked at the training ground beneath his feet, then at the ancient palaces around him. Finally, his gaze landed on the black sword tablet behind him. This heaven-reaching sword tablet. Isn't it the sword of burial of heaven? Thinking of this, he hurriedly lowered his head to check his attire. Then a look of realization flashed across his eyes. The sword of burial of heaven, Kenshin attire, and this huge mountain. This must be a dream. He was about to get up and leave to check on the situation in the ancient palaces. At this moment, a figure flew over from the edge of the training ground. It was a middle-aged man in an apricot-yellow Taoist robe, holding a golden horsetail whisk. He was thin and had a goatee on his chin. This person came to the giant sword tablet and bowed to Ji Tianqing. He reported respectfully, "Master, there is a young lady at the foot of the mountain. She claims to be your friend. She forced her way to the peak of the mountain and said that she must meet you no matter what." Ji Tianqing immediately raised his eyebrows and asked, "Friend?" Chapter 1567. After listening to the middle-aged Taoist's report, Ji Tianqing seemed to have understood something. He calmly ordered, "Bring her here." The middle-aged Taoist bowed and hurriedly left. A moment later, he returned with a graceful figure following behind him. It was a young girl wearing a long silver dress. She had an absolutely beautiful face and a bright temperament. She was tall and slender, and her long silver hair reached her waist. She looked to be in her early 20s, and there was a crescent moon mark on her forehead. Her clear eyes sparkled with joy and excitement. When she saw Ji Tianqing, she did not wait for the middle-aged Taoist to speak. Instead, she rushed to the sword steel and excitedly shouted, "Kenshin, it really is you. I've finally found you." The middle-aged Taoist frowned slightly and was about to remind the girl not to be impudent. However, Ji Tianqing waved his hand at him, indicating for him to leave. The middle-aged Taoist understood and bowed before leaving. Only then did Ji Tianqing look at the crescent moon girl in front of him. He carefully sized her up and thought to himself, "It really is her. She's the bright moon demon empress from back then, the girl who was infatuated with Kenshin." Bright Moon looked at him with sparkling eyes and spoke with gratification. Kenshin, I told you before that no matter where you went, I would definitely find you. I never thought that by the time I crossed the spatial crack and arrived here, your name would have already spread throughout the world, and you would have even set up a training ground on Tianju Peak. Do you know that I've been running around Shinwu Continent for the past 30 years just to find any news or traces of you? Bright Moon had too many things to say, and she urgently wanted to tell Kenshin everything. Ji Tianqing could see that she was travel-worn, and there was a deep fatigue between her brows. At this time, Bright Moon saw that he was silent, and her excitement gradually dissipated. She looked at Ji Tianqing somewhat cautiously and carefully observed his expression. She probed, Kenshin, are you unhappy? Do you not want to see me? Ji Tianqing looked at her calmly and gently shook his head. Bright Moon pursed her lips and lowered her head slightly. She spoke in an aggrieved tone. I know that you don't want me to follow you, but I only want to be with you. Whether we travel to the ends of the world or enter the depths of the earth, I only want to be with you. Ji Tianqing wanted to say a few words to comfort her. However, when he opened his mouth, his words were completely different. Bright Moon, you and I are not fated to be together in this life. Why must you insist on this and make yourself suffer? 3 days later, I will be here to fight against a 4 ultimate martial saint. I also need to comprehend the way of the sword. Go and rest first. Once you've thought things through, you can leave this place and find another place to go. He to the Taoist to leave. Mingyu felt wronged and indignant. She looked at him with resentful eyes before reluctantly turning to leave. Suddenly, the scene changed. Ji Tianqing appeared in a cold and gloomy starry sky. The void in all directions was filled with sparkling starlight, exuding a chilling starlight. Not far away, hundreds of gods were fighting in the starry sky. Among those gods, there was a giant tens of thousands of feet tall. His body flickered with golden light, and he could capture stars with a wave of his hand. There were also a few divine dragons that were thousands of miles long. They opened their mouths and spewed divine fire, turning the starry sky into a sea of fire. There were also gods of various forms and races. They used destructive divine techniques and fought fiercely. Ji Tianqing was still wearing his white robe and cloth shoes. He held a pitch-black ancient sword in his hand. Half of his white robe was stained red with blood. His chest and back were covered in wounds. The extreme pain had numbed his body. At this moment, he was holding a beautiful young girl in a silver dress. The girl had a crescent moon on her forehead. Her clear eyes gazed at him, full of affection. However, the crescent moon girl's arms were broken. Her body was riddled with wounds, and her dress was soaked with blood. Her life force was extremely weak. Her face was deathly pale, and her eyes were no longer lively. Her divine sense was like a candle in the wind, about to be extinguished at any moment. Even so, she seemed to feel no pain. She stared at Ji Tianqing and squeezed out a smile. Her voice was weak and intermittent. It's been 500 years. I've finally become a god and caught up to you. You're finally willing to hug me. This is the happiest moment of my life. But I really don't want to die. I still want to accompany you to conquer the world, to see you reach the peak of the divine way. Kenshin, can you kiss me? Just once. To be able to die in your arms is enough for me. You won't blame me for being greedy, right? Ji Tianqing lowered his head to look at her. He could feel her life force quickly dissipating. Her life was about to come to an end. He felt an indescribable pain in his heart. In particular, her eyes were filled with deep affection, but there was also a hint of caution. It made one's heart ache. Ji Tianqing couldn't help but think, why would there be such a foolish girl in this world? Just what kind of infatuation could make her love so deeply and yet so humbly? But just as this thought flashed through his mind, the crescent moon girl in his arms had already slowly closed her eyes. Her life force was extinguished, and her divine sense dissipated. She was already completely dead, and her delicate body was gradually becoming ice-cold. Ji Tianqing's heart ached as if it were being stabbed by a knife. He only felt that even his breathing was bone-chilling. He slowly closed his eyes, lowered his head, and pressed his thin lips against the crescent moon mark on her forehead. After a light kiss, starlight lit up between his hands and enveloped the crescent moon girl's body. In the blink of an eye, the crescent moon girl turned into specks of cold light and dissipated into the starry sky. Mingyue, if there's a next life, I'll definitely not let you down, he murmured in a low voice. He slowly straightened his body, gripped the sword of burial of heaven, and turned to look at the battlefield not far away. Die! A furious roar that shook the universe and startled the galaxy rang out. He held the sword of burial of heaven in his hand and rushed toward the gods in the sky like the god of death descending to the world. The scene gradually became blurry, and everything was annihilated in darkness. But that heart-wrenching pain lingered in Ji Tianqing's heart for a long time. When light returned to his eyes, he appeared in an exquisite and magnificent courtyard. This courtyard was the Ji family residence of the imperial city of Green Cloud Imperial City. He was only about 10 years old, and he was wearing a short-sleeved shirt. He was holding a fine steel sword and focused on practicing his swordsmanship in the courtyard. A little girl in a light yellow dress was sitting on a stone bench under a tree. Her hands were supporting her chin, and her eyes were bright as she looked at him. The little girl was about 7 or 8 years old. She was dressed luxuriously, and her delicate appearance was very cute. After watching for a while, she saw that Ji Tianqing was still practicing his swordsmanship and had no intention of stopping. She pouted and asked, "Big brother Tianqing, how long are you going to practice?" Chapter 1568. The little girl's eyes were clear and flawless. She looked very cute when she pouted unhappily. However, the 10-year-old Ji Tianqing didn't look like an ordinary noble child. He was more like a calm and steady little adult. He slowly stopped and held his sword behind his back. He turned to look at the little girl and said calmly, "Cuckoo, you are a princess. How can you sneak out of the palace every few days to play in the Ji mansion? These 2 years, you have been coming to the Ji mansion to find me every few days. Not only did you delay my swordsmanship, but you also delayed your martial arts and homework." A few days ago, Grand Tutor told His Majesty about this matter. His Majesty was somewhat dissatisfied and sent someone to remind my father. The little girl didn't care. She pouted and said angrily, "Humph, Grand Tutor is too hateful. Next time I will pull his white beard. Big brother Tianqing, I want to go back and tell His Majesty that I will stay in the Ji Mansion's school and cultivate with you. We will study together." "How can that be?" Ji Tianqing frowned and shook his head. "You are a noble, the emperor's beloved daughter. How can you cultivate in the same hall as the Ji clan's disciples? Cuckoo, you must not tell His Majesty. Otherwise, you will harm our Ji family." The little girl blinked her big clear eyes and revealed a half-understanding expression. She nodded and said, "All right, then I will listen to Big Brother Tianqing. I will return to the palace later. However, you must promise me that I will come to find you in 2 days. You must play with me." Ji Tianqing revealed a helpless expression as if he had a headache. After hesitating for a while, he could only nod and say, "All right, then you go back to the palace first. We will talk again next time." The little girl misunderstood that he had agreed. She nodded happily and revealed a brilliant smile. The scene disappeared again. When Ji Tianqing's eyes regained light, he was in the Heaven Saint Palace at the peak of God-Ceiling Mountain. In the spacious and bright hall, there was only him and a red-clothed girl standing face to face. When he saw the red-clothed girl's face, he revealed a shocked expression and asked involuntarily, "Cuckoo, why are you here?" The woman in red was tall and beautiful. She was Ji Ke. She looked at Ji Tianqing with a faint smile. Her face was full of joy, and her eyes were bright and full of excitement. "Big brother Tianqing, it's only been a few years and we meet again. You didn't expect this, did you?" Ji Tianqing was still in disbelief. He looked her up and down and asked, "Ku, aren't you in the profound sky continent? Why have you come to Mount God Bestowment?" Ji Ku explained with a smile, "When you left the central province, I told you that you must wait for me. I'll come to find you soon. After you left, I've been cultivating in seclusion for the past 8 years, trying my best to increase my strength. I've finally broken through to the primordial spirit realm, so I crossed the 9 heavens platform of the East Sea and came here to look for you." Ji Tianqing frowned and asked in confusion, "Ku, how did you know I was here?" Ji Ku revealed a bright smile and said meaningfully, "Heaven's secrets cannot be revealed. In my previous life, I chased after you for 500 years, but I didn't even get a smile from you. In this life, I won't be left behind by you. I'll follow you forever. Big brother Tianqing, I'm already here. I'll stay here from now on and cultivate with you. I won't leave." Ji Tianqing's body trembled, and his expression became complicated. The scene changed, and his eyes were filled with boundless darkness. The scenes from before were replaying in his mind. He knew that they were not real and were just memories or dreams from the depths of his soul. But he knew that those were all things that had really happened. His heart was filled with guilt and self-blame as he muttered, 1,000 years ago, Mingyue chased after Kenshin from the profound sky continent to the Shinwu continent, and then to the heavens. She was infatuated with him for 500 years, but she didn't get a smile in return. Only when she was on the verge of death did she get a hug and a kiss that was too late. And now, 'cause love for me is so deep that she swore that she would never regret it. Isn't this the same as what happened between Mingyue and Kenshin? Before Mingyue died, Kenshin had said, "If there's a next life, I won't let you down." At that time, his heart had ached as if it had been stabbed by a knife, and he had felt regret for Mingyue and Kenshin. Now, how could he repeat the same mistake? But then he thought about it. He was currently in the middle of the goddess Tier Lake to find out more about his wife, Yun Yao. He felt that he had let down Ji Ke, but he also felt that he had let down his wife, Yun Yao. Their figures appeared in his mind and intertwined with each other, causing his mind to be in chaos. But at that moment, light returned to his eyes, and another scene appeared in front of him. He was wearing a snow-white robe and a pair of cloth shoes. There was a silver belt with stars around his waist, and his long hair was tied up with a green hairband. There was no doubt that this was Kenshin's attire. He was standing in the white sea of clouds, holding a simple black sword in his left hand and his right hand behind his back. There was no sadness or joy on his face. Beside him stood a woman in an ice-blue dress. She was slender and graceful, and her temperament was as noble as a deity's. This woman's temperament was cold and holy. She was graceful like a swimming dragon. She was like a light cloud that covered the moon, and like snow that drifted in the wind. Only a goddess from the 9 heavens would have such a beautiful face and an otherworldly temperament. She glanced sideways at Ji Tianxing, and her eyes that were as clear as water contained a wisp of affection. 3 months ago, you successfully became a deity, and the divine light that covered the sky covered half of the god's nation. It has only dissipated now. You came to find me today because you want to say goodbye? The woman spoke. Her voice was as gentle as water, like a spring breeze that warmed one's heart. Ji Tianxing looked at the sea of clouds in front of him without looking sideways. He nodded and said, "You have taken good care of me all these years. Other than a word of thanks, I have nothing else to repay you." The woman shook her head gently, and there was a faint smile on her lips. She said meaningfully, "You are the most unique and the most monstrous person I have ever seen in my life. You are also the only person I can't see through. You should know in your heart that I am not helping you because you want to repay me. But I don't want to owe you a favor." Ji Tianxing said calmly, "So, to express my gratitude before I leave, let's spar." Before he could finish, the woman in the blue dress shook her head again and said in a strange tone, "How can you thank me like this? I will not meet you in battle, not in this life." Ji Tianxing was silent for a moment, and then he said, "If that's the case, then you cast the spell. I will just watch. You will use your ultimate skill, the Luo River Divine Way." The woman in the blue dress frowned slightly and looked sideways at him. She asked, "Could it be that you have already seen the flaw in it, and that it is preventing me from perfecting it?" Chapter 1569. A moment later, Ji Tianxing's vision turned into boundless darkness again. Just now, he had personally experienced the scene in his soul memories. Of course, he understood that it was the scene before Kenshin and Luo Shui parted. The time should be 1,500 years ago, when Kenshin had only become a god for 3 months. Previously, in his library, it was recorded that after Kenshin became a god, the divine light that covered the sky did not disappear for 3 months. Later on, Kenshin fought with martial god Luo Shui on the cloud top and defeated Luo Shui in 3 moves. Moreover, Kenshin enlightened Luo Shui, causing his divine technique to reach perfection. But now, it seemed that the historical records were not completely correct. It was true that Kenshin enlightened Luo Shui, but he did not fight with Luo Shui. However, this was not important. What touched Ji Tianxing's heart was that he did not expect that even Luo Shui would have feelings for Kenshin. "Kenshin, oh Kenshin, what kind of person are you? You are actually so monstrous, creating so many miracles, and even making Mingyue and Luo Shui fall in love with you." Just as these thoughts flashed through his mind, the scene in front of him changed again. He was standing above the vast sea of clouds, looking at the horizon in front of him. At the end of the horizon, There was a peerlessly beautiful white-clothed figure stepping on the white clouds into the distance. Even though it was very far away, and he could only see her back. However, he was most familiar with that back. It was Yun Yao, whom he missed dearly. Yao Yao! He called out happily, crossing the sea of clouds as fast as lightning, and rushed toward Yun Yao. Yun Yao seemed to have heard his call and slowly turned to look at him. She was as beautiful as ever, as elegant and holy as a fairy from the 9 heavens. She stood quietly on the cloud top, her expression calm as she looked at him gently. However, just as Ji Tianqing was flying toward Yun Yao, a call suddenly came from the sea of clouds on both sides. Big brother Tianqing, don't leave. You can't abandon me. That clear and melodious voice contained a strong sense of anxiety and reluctance. He turned his head to the left and saw a pretty girl standing in the sea of clouds. That young girl was born with bright eyes and white teeth. Her face was delicate and pretty, and her figure was slim. Her temperament was very pure and cute. She was precisely the Shao clan's Shao Linger. She looked at Ji Tianqing with a bitter expression. Her eyes were filled with tenderness as she said in a sorrowful tone, Big brother Tianqing, you always knew that Ling Er's heart only belonged to you. But the Shao clan has already been annihilated, the old ancestor is dead, and my parents were also killed by the devil race. Right now, Ling Er is all alone and has no one to rely on in this world. The only person she can rely on is you. Are you really so heartless as to abandon Ling Er? If you leave like this, how will Ling Er survive? As she spoke, tears welled up in her clear eyes, and her beautiful face was filled with tears. Such a delicate Shao Ling Er was extremely lovable and cherished. Even though Ji Tianqing did not have any feelings for her, he could not bear to see her in such pain. He shook his head and said, Miss Ling Er, I've let down the entire Shao clan. The old ancestor died for me, but between you and I, it's impossible. Before he could finish speaking, another gentle voice came from the sea of clouds to his right. Sir Ji, please wait. He turned his head and saw Jiang Ningxue, who was wearing a star-patterned dress. Her eyes were filled with affection and resentment as she looked at him. Jiang Ningxue frowned, and her face was filled with sorrow. She solemnly said, Ningxue traveled thousands of miles and crossed half of the Xinwu continent. I didn't hesitate to spend 20 years just to find you and confess my feelings to you. Ever since I've been with you for half a year, Ningxue only has you in her heart. None of the young elites from the various countries can enter Ningxue's eyes. In this life, Ningxue will marry no one but you. Ningxue has no other request than to stay by Sir Ji's side forever. Even if I have to be your servant, I'm willing. Ji Tianqing immediately frowned, but he calmly said, Miss Jiang, your birth is extraordinary, and you're the beloved daughter of an ancient family. Countless young talents have tried to woo you. You know that I have no feelings for you, so why do you keep pestering me? Before Jiang Ningxue could reply, another figure appeared in the sea of clouds in front of them. It was a red-clothed beauty with a noble and elegant temperament. It was Ji Ke. She quietly stood in the clouds and stared at Ji Tianqing. She gently opened her cherry lips and asked, Big brother Tianqing, are you still going to abandon Ku and leave? Her tone was very complicated. She was not angry, or resentful. Instead, she was filled with pain and helplessness. It was as if she had already expected this outcome and had prepared herself to bear the pain of parting. Fine, big brother Tianqing, if you want to go, then go. Ku already knew that you wouldn't stay for me, no matter if it's 10 years, 100 years, or 1,000 years. I won't force you to stay. I'll spend my entire life chasing after your footsteps, no matter where you go. As she spoke, she squeezed out a smile, but 2 lines of tears uncontrollably fell from her eyes. Ji Tianqing stood in the sea of clouds and looked at Shao Ling Er on his left and Jiang Ningxue on his right. In the end, he looked at Ji Ke in front of him. He frowned and thought for a moment before speaking in a serious tone. Miss Ling Er, Miss Jiang, thank you for your favor, but I don't have the fortune to enjoy it. Please don't pester me and make me sad. After he finished speaking, he stared at Ji Ke and smiled. Ke, don't say such silly things. I'm your big brother Tianqing. How could I abandon you? You've liked to stick to me since you were young, and I've always treated you as a sister. Of course, I'll take care of you. If you trust me, then stay and wait for me. After I find Yao Yao, I'll come and find you again. Hearing his words, Ji Ke raised his sleeve to wipe the tears on his face and nodded. Okay, big brother Tianqing. I'll wait for you to come back. After she finished speaking, she turned around and flew away, disappearing into the sea of clouds. Shao Ling Er and Jiang Ningxue sighed miserably. and their figures also gradually disappeared. After the three of them disappeared, Ji Tianqing saw the horizon in front of him. Yun Yao was still standing on top of the clouds, quietly looking at him. When he flew all the way and arrived in front of Yun Yao, a gentle smile appeared on Yun Yao's beautiful face. "Tianqing, you're finally here." When her gentle and pleasant voice sounded, the entire scene disappeared. Ji Tianqing's vision turned dark, and his soul began to gradually awaken. Swoosh! When his consciousness completely awakened, his six senses also quickly recovered. He could feel that wisps of cold wind were gently caressing his body. The rustling sound of bamboo leaves in the breeze entered his ears. He slowly opened his eyes and saw that he was on a small island in the middle of the God-tier lake. Under his feet were limestone steps, and in front of him was a simple 7-story pagoda. On both sides were lush bamboo forests. Sword 13, who was wearing a green robe and carrying an ancient sword on his back, was standing beside him, looking at him with a strange expression. "You're indeed a freak. You only used an hour to pass the love test. Don't you have a few close female friends?" "No friends or family." Ji Tianqing immediately understood. The 7th test was the love test. That was why his soul had fallen into a deep sleep, and so many soul memories had appeared, and so many scenes had appeared. Fortunately, he had successfully passed the 7th test and arrived at the small island in the middle of the lake. As for Sword 13's reaction, he didn't care at all. He raised his head to look at the 7-story pagoda in front of him and asked, "Senior Sword, I've passed the 7 stars heaven test. Can I ask to see the island master now?" Sword 13 looked at him again before nodding. "Of course you can. Otherwise, you wouldn't have been able to come to the island. The island master is cultivating on the God-tier pagoda. Come with me." Chapter 1570. The ancient pagoda had a total of 7 floors and was 100 feet tall. The pagoda was dark brown in color. It was unknown how many years it had been standing on the island. Its surface was covered with mottled marks and emitted an ancient aura. Ji Tianqing followed Jian Shisan into the ancient pagoda and climbed to the top floor. The light in the ancient pagoda was dim, and the air was slightly humid. A faint mist lingered around the window and did not dissipate for a long time. After a quarter of an hour, the two of them followed the winding staircase and reached the top floor of the ancient pagoda. The main hall on the top floor was brightly lit, and the surrounding windows were all open. The whistling lake wind blew, bringing with it the scent of grass and lake water. In the spacious main hall, mysterious patterns were carved on the ground. They curved and folded, as if forming some kind of abstract picture. But Ji Tianqing could see that it was an ancient saint-level array. The dome of the main hall was inlaid with thousands of gems and pearls, shining brightly like stars in the sky. In the middle of the main hall, there was a light green zither table. On the table was a wide purple jade zither, as well as an incense burner and a pot of spirit tea. A long-haired woman in a purple dress with a graceful back was kneeling in front of the zither table. Her black hair hung down to her waist like a black waterfall. Her wide purple robe sleeves and gorgeous collar and cuffs showed an extraordinary noble temperament. A white veil covered her entire face, revealing only a portion of her forehead that was as white as jade and a pair of eyes that were as bright as the stars. But the more the veil covered her face, the more it made people want to remove the veil and see her true appearance. Her clear and bright eyes that were as deep as the stars contained a cold and indifferent aura, as well as a mysterious power that could see through people's hearts. But her entire body emitted an innate coldness and a sense of loneliness that went deep into her bones. It was a sense of loneliness and desolation that ordinary people could not understand. It came from the soul and was invisible, but it went deep into the heart and soul. When Ji Tianqing stepped into the main hall, he felt that it was a little cold. Now that he took a few more glances at the woman in the purple dress, he felt his mind and soul become still, and a faint layer of worry and sorrow enveloped him. Jian Shisan brought Ji Tianqing to the main hall, bowed to the purple-dressed lady, and said respectfully, "Reporting to Island Master, Ji Tianqing has arrived. This person has already passed the 7 stars heavenly barrier." The purple-dressed woman was the mysterious god Tyr's island lord. Her back was still facing the two of them as she faced the god Tyr lake outside the window. She slowly raised her right arm and waved her fair and slender palm. Sword 13 immediately understood, and after bowing, he turned around and left. Only Ji Tianqing and the god Tyr's island master were left in the hall on the top floor. Ji Tianqing cupped his hands towards her and said calmly, Ji Tianqing greets God Tier's Island Master. The God Tier's Island Master did not reply. After a moment of silence, she asked, Why have you come? Her voice was not as crisp as that of a young girl, but it was as deep and gentle as that of a middle-aged woman, containing a special charm. Ji Tianqing did not hide anything and answered honestly, I miss my wife, and I want to reunite with her. However, we are far apart from each other, and I don't know where she is and what her current situation is. After he finished speaking, the God Tier's Island Master nodded slightly and said indifferently, Since you are able to pass the barrier of love, it seems like you are deeply in love with your wife and will not change even in death. The God Tier's Lake can help you resolve your obsession, allowing you to see your wife and understand her current situation. However, at this point, the God Tier's Island Master paused for a moment. Ji Tianqing frowned slightly and thought to himself, Could it be that passing the 7 stars heavenly barrier is not enough? Does the God Tier's Island Master have other requests or conditions? Thinking of this, he cupped his hands towards the God Tier's Island Master and said, Island Master, please enlighten me. The God Tier's Island Master continued, The moon waxes and wanes, and the world is full of misfortune. What you are about to see might not be what you want to see. I am going to ask you 3 questions, and you have to answer truthfully. If your wife has already fallen in love with someone else, what will you do? Ji Tianqing did not expect the God Tier's Island Master to ask such a question, and he immediately frowned. I believe in my wife, just like I believe in myself. We have already sworn an oath to be a couple for life. Even if the heavens fall and the earth rends, even if the seas dry up and the rocks crumble, we will never leave each other until reincarnation. The God Tier's Island Master seemed to have expected him to answer like this. Her cold and deep eyes did not change in the slightest as she continued to ask, If she has been separated from you for too long, and the feelings she had for you in the past have already faded away. Now, she has met the one who truly makes her crazy, the one who will remain faithful to her even in death. What will you do? Ji Tianqing did not understand her intentions, but he could hear the indifference and firmness in her tone, which left no room for doubt. He seriously considered for a moment before replying with an indifferent tone. If that is the case, I will naturally break off the engagement with her and fulfill her wish. I will also personally act as a matchmaker for her. If the one she is destined to marry doesn't agree, I will exterminate his entire family. If that person agrees, I will only kill him alone. The God Tier's Island Master immediately frowned. Her eyes, which had always been calm like an ancient well, finally had a change. A strange look flashed through her eyes. What an interesting answer. You are very special. She calmly evaluated and continued to ask, Let me ask you one last question. If you see her through the God Tier's Lake, and she has already died, what will you do? Ji Tianqing answered without hesitation. If she is already dead, I will work even harder and pursue the peak of the martial way at all costs. The heavens are as high as the 9 heavens, and the earth is as high as the 18 hells. Even if I have to ascend to the heavens or descend to the earth, I will still search for a secret divine technique to revive her. If the human world does not have it, I will go to hell. If the earth does not have it, I will go to the 9 heavens. The God Tier's Island Master raised her eyebrows again, and a hint of surprise flashed through her eyes. She originally thought that if Ji Tianqing was fickle in love, he would sigh in grief and recover from his sadness after many years. If he was infatuated, he would accompany his wife to the Yellow Springs with death. However, she did not expect that Ji Tianqing would give such an answer. After a moment of silence, she opened her mouth and said, You have passed my test. Go to the psychic platform and sit down. I will cast the technique for you. Ji Tianqing nodded and bowed to express his gratitude. Many thanks to the Island Master for granting my wish. After he finished speaking, he strode across the spacious hall and walked to the eaves of the corridor outside the pagoda. The eaves of the corridor faced the surface of the God Tier's Lake. There was a 9-petaled lotus throne cast from ancient bronze, and it was emitting a mysterious aura. Ji Tianqing climbed onto the throne and sat down cross-legged. He closed his eyes and thought about Yun Yao with all his heart. The past between the two of them, the bits and pieces of the past, her voice and appearance, her every frown and smile, all of them clearly appeared in his mind. At the same time, the God Tier's Island Master raised her arms and extended her 10 fair fingers to slowly pluck the strings of the guqin. Ding ding dong dong, a melodious sound rang out. It trembled and twirled 1,000 times as it reverberated in the ancient pagoda. Following the sound of the guqin, the array on the ground of the main hall was activated and lit up with a faint green light. Chapter 1571. Ji Tianqing could clearly feel that the ancient pagoda was emitting a mysterious power that enveloped the entire God's Tier lake. After 10 seconds, he stopped reminiscing and reminiscing. When he opened his eyes, he discovered that the originally calm God's Tier lake had changed. Layers of ripples appeared on the mirror-like surface of the lake, reflecting dazzling colors and forming all kinds of patterns. After a while, all kinds of messy patterns were pieced together to form a huge picture. It was a picture with a radius of 200 miles that covered the entire God's Tier lake. It was so lifelike that it made one feel as if they were there. Of course, only he could see this picture. In the picture was a magnificent, majestic, and dignified palace. The palace stood in the vast sea of clouds. There were silver-armored guards standing guard inside and outside the palace. There were also many young maidservants who were busy. In the depths of the palace, there was a simple and elegant study room that was heavily guarded. A 3-meter-tall man in golden armor stood at the door of the study room. He was not human. His body was tall and powerful, and his skin was covered in golden dragon scales. Although his body was similar to a human's, he had a dragon head and a dragon tail behind him. After seeing his appearance, Ji Tianqing was stunned. He thought to himself, could this guard be a dark gold dragon person? When I first entered the Dharch Palace, I saw a statue of a dark gold dragon person and a statue of a harpy beside the palace lord's throne. Could this dark gold dragon person be related to the palace lord? The next moment, the picture changed to the study room. He immediately saw that in the spacious and bright study, there was a beautiful woman in a long white dress sitting in front of a large table. The woman in white had long hair that reached her waist. She was gorgeous, and her temperament was cold and elegant. She was like a fairy from the 9th heaven. That was his wife, Yun Yao, whom he missed dearly. At this moment, Yun Yao was holding a jade pendant with both hands. She stared at the jade pendant with deep eyes and looked like she was in a daze. Ji Tianqing naturally recognized that the jade pendant in her hand was half of the rhino bracelet. Her beautiful brows were slightly knitted, and there was deep worry between her brows. It was obvious that her heart was tied down and she was thinking of him. The current her was clearly much stronger than before. However, her face had become thinner, and she was no longer as beautiful and radiant as before. She was like a resplendent pearl that was covered in a layer of dust. She seemed to have lost her splendor and was extremely haggard. Ji Tianqing saw her haggard face and sorrowful eyes. He could even feel her longing. His heart was also filled with pity. He couldn't wait to fly to Yun Yao's side immediately so that she wouldn't be so worried. Unfortunately, this idea could only be thought of and was destined to never be realized. At this moment, a 2-meter-tall figure with an exceptionally enchanting figure walked to Yun Yao's side. This was a woman with a somewhat strange appearance. Her figure was extremely hot, and she wore a tight black leather jacket. Her cheeks were thin and long. Her hands were like sharp claws, sharp and long. The nails on her 8 fingers were all pitch black. On her back was a pair of pitch black wings. Ji Tianqing immediately recognized that this woman was the harpy. The harpy walked to Yun Yao and stood behind her. She bowed respectfully and said, "Master, congratulations on coming out of seclusion. Your divine skills have improved again, and your strength has increased by 1 level." Yun Yao's thoughts were interrupted. She held the Lingxi bracelet in her left hand and nodded with a calm expression. She asked, "Black Eagle, did anything happen in the palace during the month I was in seclusion?" Black Eagle's dark purple lips curled up slightly, and the corner of his mouth raised into a sneer. He said, "Master, you are the destined goddess, the future goddess. Who dares to behave atrociously in the Cloudwater Palace? However, those good-for-nothing disciples of God envied your talent and were jealous that you were highly valued by the Divine Master. They were dissatisfied in their hearts. Master, you didn't need to participate in the assessment and directly became an honorary disciple of God. You were also selected by the Divine Palace to participate in the exchange of the 3 divine kingdoms in half a year. This incident made many disciples of God go crazy with jealousy. There were a few reckless guys who criticized you behind your back." Speaking of this, a touch of contempt flashed in Black Eagle's eyes. He sneered and said, "Half a month ago, I went to talk to those disciples of God in person. They all said that they were sincerely remorseful and would never criticize you again. Yun Yao frowned slightly and asked in a helpless tone, "Did you hurt them again? How many did you hurt this time? How are their injuries?" Black Eagle curled his lips and said, "I just punished them lightly and didn't hit them hard. But those good-for-nothings were too useless. They were seriously injured after a few hits. I think in 3 months, they can do nothing but seclusion to heal their injuries." Yun Yao smiled bitterly and said, "Black Eagle, it's not easy for us to establish ourselves here. Don't pay attention to those people's opinions and criticisms to avoid causing trouble. Moreover, we won't stay here for long in the future. We will leave eventually. Why should we make enemies everywhere?" Black Eagle obviously didn't agree with her. He said gloomily, "Master, you're too kind. You're calm and aloof from worldly affairs. That's why those good-for-nothings want a yard after taking an inch. You're magnanimous and don't lower yourself to the same level as those good-for-nothings. You've been living in the Cloud-Water Palace, living in seclusion and practicing hard. But Golden Dragon, and I can't let you be humiliated even a little bit. We can't tolerate those good-for-nothings criticizing the future goddess." Black Eagle's tone was very solemn when he said this, as if he was shouldering a sacred mission. Yun Yao probably also knew that she couldn't dispel or change her mind. She could only sigh silently. At this moment, Black Eagle glanced at the half of the Lingxi bracelet in her hand and asked tentatively, "Master, are you thinking about Mr. Ji again?" Yun Yao smiled faintly and nodded. "Now that we're far away from each other and have lost contact, I can only think of him when I see something. This Lingxi bracelet was a gift from Master, and it has an incomparably special meaning to us. I don't know if he's still on that continent. Has the chaos of the demons been quelled? Has he come to the Shinwu continent? Will he come to find me?" Black Eagle nodded as if he understood. He said solemnly, "Although I don't understand the relationship between men and women, and I've never seen Mr. Ji before, Master Ji is more important to me. However, Master has said that young Master Ji is more important than your own life. This subordinate also hopes that young Master Ji will be able to return safely and reunite with you soon." Yun Yao nodded silently and looked at the sea of clouds outside the window. She seemed a little lost and absent-minded. After a long silence, she put away the Lingxi bracelet and instructed, "Black Eagle, you guys continue to guard the palace. Don't go out as you wish, and don't get into fights with others." Black Eagle looked puzzled and asked, "Master, you've only been in seclusion for 2 days. Are you going back to cultivate again?" Yun Yao nodded and said with a complicated tone, "All this time, whenever I have free time, my mind is filled with his figure." Chapter 1572. After a while, Yun Yao left the study room and disappeared from the scene. Then, the entire image slowly dissipated. The God's Tear Lake returned to its calm state. The surface of the lake was as bright as a mirror. Everything had ended. Ji Tianqing was still sitting on the throne. He stared at the lake in a daze and pondered. "The scene I saw just now was Yao Yao's current situation. She should be cultivating in the Cloud-Water Palace, in the holy land of martial arts in the Luoshui God Nation. The harpy called Black Eagle and the dark gold dragon man were both her loyal servants. With the protection of the Black Eagle and the Golden Dragon Man, she will not be humiliated or hurt." When he thought of this, his heart, which had been hanging in the air, finally relaxed. Judging from the current situation, Yun Yao's treatment in the Luoshui God Nation was the same as his treatment in the God's Mountain. They were both peerless geniuses who were envied by others. Moreover, the Cloud-Water Palace was Yun Yao's personal residence. She was highly regarded by the Master of God and had become an honorary God's disciple. The God's Palace had already decided to send her to participate in the exchange conference in half a year. This was the news that made Ji Tianqing the most excited. Half a year later, Yun Yao would represent the Luoshui God Nation to participate in the exchange conference of the 3 God Nations. As long as he passed the assessment and became one of the top 5 God's disciples, he would be able to represent the vast God Nation to participate in the exchange conference. By then, he would be able to see Yun Yao with his own eyes and reunite with her. I made the right bet. My efforts over the past few months were not in vain. In another half a year, I will be able to see Yao Yao. Ji Tianqing cheered in his heart. He was extremely excited. At this moment, a cold and indifferent voice entered his mind. "It seems like you have gotten the answer that you wanted. This cold voice contained a magical power that could shake one's divine soul and chill one's body. Ji Tianqing immediately woke up. He turned his head and saw the god Tyr's island lord in the main hall looking at him with an ice-cold gaze. He slowly got up and left the throne. He walked to the middle of the hall and bowed to the god's Tyr's island master. "Thank you, island master. My wish has been fulfilled." The god Tyr's island master looked at him deeply and nodded slightly. "I hope you won't have any regrets and will never come here again." After saying these words, she waved her sleeves and said, "Go." A faint green light flew out from her sleeve and wrapped around Ji Tianqing. Ji Tianqing only felt a blur in front of his eyes as he left the top floor of the main hall. In the next moment, he had already landed below the god's Tyr pagoda, standing on the bluestone path hidden by the bamboo forest. "May you have no regrets and never come here again." He muttered these words and immediately understood what the god Tyr's island master meant. Thus, he turned to the god's Tyr tower and bowed again, expressing his sincere gratitude. After he bowed, Sword 13's voice sounded out from beside him. "Hey, you've only been up there for a quarter of an hour. Why are you leaving already?" While saying that, Sword 13 sized him up with a strange expression and muttered softly, "It's really strange. This kid does everything so quickly. Is he born in the year of lightning?" Ji Tianqing heard his muttering and glanced at him expressionlessly. "Senior Sword, my wish has been fulfilled. Take me away." "Yes, I'll send you out now." Only then did Sword 13 put away his strange gaze and thoughts. He took him away from the island and flew towards the shore of the lake. After a quarter of an hour, the two of them arrived near the invisible barrier. Sword 13 cast a spell to open the barrier and opened a multicolored light door. Ji Tianqing bid farewell to him and flew through the light door. After leaving the god's Tyr lake, he flew into the sky as fast as lightning and returned in the direction of God Bestowment Mountain. Sword 13 stood in the sky and watched his back. He frowned and pondered for a long time before turning around and returning to the god's Tyr lake. Although Ji Tianqing came to the god's Tyr lake this time, it was really a long journey and full of dangers. On the way here, he was even intercepted by the Black-Wing Martial Lord of the Azure Dragon Empire and was seriously injured. But now, he felt that everything was worth it. The god's Tyr lake helped him achieve his wish and saw Yun Yao's current situation. He was calm and only wanted to return to God Bestowment Mountain as soon as possible and work hard to cultivate and increase his strength. As long as he cultivated hard for another half a year, he would be able to see Yun Yao. This filled his heart with anticipation. On the way back, he flew through the sea of clouds at lightning speed and traveled day and night. 3 days later, he flew for 500,000 miles and was only halfway to God Bestowment Mountain. It was dusk at this moment. The sun had already set and night was about to fall. He was flying above a lake with a radius of thousands of miles when he suddenly felt a chill of death crawl up his back. His sharp premonition made him realize that some danger was approaching. He gradually slowed down his flying speed and carefully took precautions. He also released his divine sense to explore the surrounding 50 miles. Suddenly, black fog surged out of thin air on both sides of the sky. Swoosh! In the blink of an eye, the two extremely dense clouds of black fog spread out in all directions and enveloped an area of 40 miles. A domain completely condensed from the black fog was formed. Ji Tianqing was trapped in the domain and could not escape in time. He was suppressed by the powerful domain's power, and his speed was reduced by about 40%. The sky in all directions became as dark as ink, and not a single ray of light could be seen. The dense chill of death and the sinister demonic aura assaulted him from every direction. His expression changed drastically, and a cold glint appeared in his eyes as he revealed a shocked expression. "It's actually demonic aura. The Shenwu continent actually has demons? No, this is impossible. The history books of the Shenwu continent clearly record that there are no demons on the continent. Since ancient times, the demons have been sealed in the Tianxian continent." As he thought about this, a thought suddenly flashed through his mind, and he thought of a certain person, the ancestral demon god. It must be him. Only he could have left the Tianxian continent and escaped to the Shenwu continent. As if to verify his conjecture, 2 balls of blood-red brilliance appeared in the night sky in front of him as soon as he had this thought. The 2 balls of blood-red light quickly condensed into 2 30-meter-tall giant demons that stood in the night sky, one on the left and one on the right. 2 pairs of dark red demonic eyes flickered with a cold, bloodthirsty light as they stared at Lu Yin and carefully observed him. "Kikik, it really is you, kid. It looks like we didn't find the wrong person. Ji Tianxing, our 6 months of searching for you were not in vain. We've finally caught you." The two giant demons grinned maliciously, and their voices were filled with ridicule and killing intent. Ji Tianxing stared at them with an icy expression, and a look of realization flashed through his eyes. Blood God Scions. Furthermore, these two Blood God Scions have both reached the 9th level of the primordial spirit realm. It looks like they've slaughtered a large number of living beings, and their strength has increased rapidly. He calmly looked at the two Blood God Scions and asked, "The Shinwu continent is so vast. How did you find my tracks so quickly?" The Blood God Scion on the left sneered proudly. "Kikik, what a stupid question." Chapter 1573. The two blood gods were certain that Ji Tianxing would die without a doubt. Thus, they were confident that victory was within their grasp, and they were very pleased with themselves. The blood god on the right grinned at Ji Tianxing and said, "Kid, the ancestral demon god's abilities are far beyond your imagination. As long as you are still in this world, the demon god only needs a drop of your blood or a strand of your hair to use a secret technique to detect your location. Do you think you'll be safe after escaping to Shinwu continent? How naive. Today is the day you die. We will devour your flesh and blood and bring your primordial spirit back to the demon god." Ji Tianxing immediately understood, and a cold killing intent flashed through his eyes. "I thought that the ancestral demon god was also within the Taihao kingdom, but I didn't expect it to be like this. It just so happens that I've just broken through. Since you two are so eager to die, I'll use you to test my sword." As he spoke, his right palm lit up with a black light, and the simple and mysterious burial of heaven appeared. Previously, his enemies had all been powerhouses from the various empires. He had not been willing to use the burial of heaven in order to avoid exposing the whereabouts of the divine sword. But now things were different. He could face two blood gods without any fear. "Draw your sword." The burial of heaven was unsheathed, and a 300-meter-long golden sword light wrapped in dazzling purple lightning slashed towards one of the blood gods. The two blood gods had been filled with pride, but they had not expected Lu Yin to attack first. They were immediately enraged, and their killing intent surged. "Little bastard, you're courting death. You want to die? I'll fulfill your wish." Amidst the furious roars, the two blood gods' illusions also waved their palms and used the demonic Dao secret technique. They unleashed a blood-red light that blotted out the sky and covered the earth, besieging Ji Tianxing. Bang! 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 The golden sword collided with the bloody light, producing a deafening sound that reverberated through the dark domain. Both sides were forced back 300 meters, and neither side had gained the upper hand. "You really do have the strength of a 9th-level primordial spirit cultivator. No wonder you're so arrogant." Ji Tianxing sneered and once again brandished the sword of burial of heaven, using all of his strength to slash. "Swing your sword." The sword of burial of heaven swept out, slashing out a 1,000-foot-long giant sword with dazzling golden light and flashing lightning. The giant sword tore through the night sky and struck the blood god on the left. Boom! The blood god's descendant was slashed by the giant sword on the spot. Its huge body shattered and spread out like a tide. However, it was completely unscathed. It quickly condensed back into a 10-foot-tall giant demon. It was enraged. It roared angrily and rushed towards Ji Tianxing, desperately trying to kill him. The other blood god's illusions also formed 3 giant axes with bloody light and slashed at Ji Tianxing. At this critical juncture, a golden light flashed behind Ji Tianxing, and a pair of golden wings appeared. Wings of the golden rock. The golden wings instantly closed and wrapped around his entire body. Bang, bang, bang. A series of muffled sounds burst out. The golden wings flashed with golden light, and the bloody axes were shattered. The entire dark realm was illuminated by the bloody light and the golden light, becoming chaotic. Ji Tianxing successfully blocked the attacks of the two blood gods' illusions with the powerful defense of the golden wings. He was unscathed. The two blood gods' illusions became more and more murderous. They used their secret killing techniques again and launched a pincer attack. The bloody light blade that could split the sky and earth, the bloody light blade that was like a rain of arrows, and the poisonous and disastrous energy like a tide rushed towards Ji Tianxing. Ji Tianxing was fearless. He formed a sword art with his left hand and held the sword of burial of heaven with his right hand, attacking with all of his might. Stab! Sky-breaking sword. 7-star sword. He kept swinging the sword of burial of heaven, either stabbing or slashing, creating dazzling sword auras. He used the divine concealment step, and his body flashed back and forth in the dark night sky. Both sides used all of their strength and fought fiercely. Soon, 100 breaths of time passed. Ji Tianqing and the two blood gods' illusions exchanged more than 100 blows, but they were unable to determine a victor. He had used a lot of magic power to destroy the two blood gods' illusions more than 10 times. However, the blood gods' illusions were not made of flesh and blood. They were almost immortal. After being destroyed, they could reform into different forms and continue to fight Ji Tianqing. As long as their power was not exhausted, they could not be killed. However, Ji Tianqing could not continue to fight with them. His magic power would eventually be exhausted, and his body would also be damaged. Even if his body's defense was strong, it could not withstand the corrosion of the poisonous and disastrous energy for a long time. Both sides knew this. Therefore, the two blood gods' illusions were very confident and proud. Ji Tianqing, I have already said that you will definitely die today. Don't be stubborn, kneel down obediently and accept your death. Haha. In the dark realm, we are immortal and indestructible existences. Only death awaits you. Ji Tianqing was not angry at all. He looked coldly at the two blood gods' illusions and sneered. It seems that the two of you were refined by the ancestral demon god after escaping to the Shenwu continent. You probably don't know this, but I have killed more blood gods' illusions than you have seen. On the Tianshan continent, everyone knows that I am the nemesis of the demons and the terminator of the blood gods' illusions. The two blood gods' illusions were stunned, and their expressions turned ugly. Ji Tianqing's guess was correct. The two of them had indeed been created by the ancestral demon god after arriving on the Shenwu continent. However, they immediately recovered and cursed in anger and contempt. Brat, you are too arrogant. I want you to taste pain and die a miserable death in despair. Ignorant worm, this sovereign will now let you experience what an undying body is. As they roared, the two blood gods' illusions transformed into giant beasts that were 300 meters tall. They valiantly charged at Ji Tianqing. Ji Tianqing was fearless as he summoned his golden primordial spirit sword. Whoosh! The 1,000-meter-tall golden primordial spirit sword appeared behind him and emitted a golden light that illuminated the entire umbral realm. Soul Slayer! Following his roar, the burial of heaven suddenly grew to a height of 3,000 meters and merged with the golden primordial spirit sword. Then the giant sword, whose power had increased by several times, released purple lightning that blotted out the sky and slashed at one of the blood gods' illusions. The terrifying power suppressed the blood gods' illusions. It looked at the giant sword in horror and wanted to turn into a bloody light to escape and avoid the giant sword's attack. However, it was unable to do so. Boom! With a deafening sound, the blood god's illusions was struck by the giant sword, and its body was engulfed by the lightning. Its 300-meter-tall body was instantly cut into thousands of pieces. It was filled with unwillingness, and it wanted to use the same trick to reform the fragments. However, the boundless purple divine lightning enveloped every single fragment and raged violently. It was completely blown to smithereens and would not be able to recover in a short period of time. At the same time, Ji Tianqing rushed over and waved his hand to release a sacred white light. Whoosh! The blazing white brilliance swept across the night sky like a fleeting shadow, devouring all of the bloody light fragments. Chapter 1574. The holy white light was very powerful and had the effect of purifying demonic qi and blood gods' illusions. The source of the white light was the heaven-mending pearl in Ji Tianqing's mind. Therefore, he was the nemesis of the demonic race and blood gods' illusions. After killing one blood god's illusions, he turned to look at the other blood god's illusions. The blood god's illusions were obviously stunned. Shock and horror appeared on its ferocious face. How is this possible? How did you kill it? It clearly could not understand what method Ji Tianqing had used to kill the blood god's illusions. Previously, it had been arrogant and thought that it could easily kill Ji Tianqing with its illusions. But now, what it relied on had been destroyed. Deep fear grew in its heart. Ji Tianqing did not waste any time. He immediately controlled the primordial spirit golden sword and slashed at it with destructive power. Die! The giant golden sword, which was thousands of feet long, emitted a dazzling brilliance and instantly arrived in front of the blood god's illusions. It turned pale with fright and hurriedly manipulated the dark domain to form two pitch-black barriers in front of it. Kaboom! With a deafening sound, the giant golden sword shattered the black barriers and hit the blood god's illusions. It was immediately sent flying and smashed into the barrier of the dark domain. The power of the dark domain weakened a lot, and many cracks appeared on the black barrier. The blood god's illusions also had one of its arms cut off. Its body was full of cracks, and it kept flashing with a dark red light. However, it quickly returned to its original state, and its strength was still as strong as ever. It also woke up from its shock and fear. It realized that Ji Tianqing's strength was not as terrifying as it thought. At least, it was not killed by the mysterious white light when it was hit by the sword. Kakik, even if you have some kind of secret technique, it's useless. I will kill you before you can use it. It grinned hideously, and its body emitted a bloody light that shot into the sky. It emitted an overwhelming murderous aura. Demon Blade of Annihilation. It let out a thunderous roar, waved its arms wildly, and manipulated the gigantic domain of darkness. The dark domain that covered dozens of miles instantly condensed into a black demon blade that was thousands of feet long. The Demon Blade of Annihilation was extremely black and condensed to the extreme. It contained the purest demonic qi and the most terrifying destructive power. Immediately after, the blood god's illusions turned into endless bloody light and rushed into the black Demon Blade of Annihilation. With the combination of the two, the Demon Blade of Annihilation became more. The blood-red light transformed into raging flames that curled around the pitch-black demonic blade, emitting a terrifying bloody stench. Kill! The blood god's illusions of annihilation. Almost at the same time as this roar, the world-exterminating devil blade exploded with a power that could destroy everything and slashed towards Ji Tianqing from the sky. At this moment, the annihilation of annihilation was annihilation. An icy aura of death enveloped the world, and a layer of dark red blood light enveloped the world. With Ji Tianqing as the center, the heaven and earth within a radius of 100 miles were like a bloody purgatory. The night sky became fragmented, with layers of ripples spreading out. On the ground below, patches of forest vegetation were corroded by the aura of death and the bloody light, instantly withering and turning into black ash. Several large mountains in the vicinity were also crushed by the destructive power and collapsed into ruins on the spot. Ji Tianqing stood in the night sky, enduring the most terrifying pressure. With his aura and soul locked onto by the world-exterminating devil blade, he had nowhere to run. Even if he teleported away, he would still be caught. Moreover, the invisible pressure of the world-exterminating demon blade was suppressing him, making him feel as if he had fallen into a quagmire, unable to move at all. At this critical moment, his pupils constricted as he stared at the world-exterminating demonic blade that was descending from the sky. His eyes flashed with a dignified look. This blood god's son is extraordinary. It actually grasped such a powerful secret technique that increased its strength by 4 times. The power of the world-exterminating demonic blade had already surpassed the primordial soul realm and was comparable to the full power of a tribulation realm elite. It was enough to threaten his life. He didn't dare to be careless. He immediately opened the third eye on his forehead and released his ultimate move. Lightning! As he roared, the divine lightning Dharma eye suddenly opened. Purple lightning flashed in the azure-blue pupil. Endless divine lightning surged out like a tide, condensing into a 1,000-foot-long divine lightning pillar that blasted toward the world-exterminating demonic blade. He believed that the sacred and violent divine lightning was the nemesis of the evil demonic qi. Previously, when he was breaking through the God's Tier Lake, he had swallowed a full pool of divine lightning and had accumulated an endless amount of divine lightning. This was the perfect time to use it. In the next moment, the divine lightning pillar and the world-exterminating demonic blade collided violently. Kaboom! An earth-shattering explosion resounded through the sky. The 1,000-foot-long dark purple divine lightning pillar shattered on the spot, turning into billions of lightning arcs that covered the night sky for hundreds of miles. Ji Tianqing was also sent flying by the violent power. He rolled for more than 10 miles before stopping. The backlash from the divine lightning made his face pale, and blood flowed out from the corner of his mouth. His back was hunched as he panted heavily. The huge world-exterminating demonic blade wasn't destroyed. It was only scent flying a few thousand feet. A few cracks appeared on the demonic blade, and dense cracks spread out. The circling blood-red flames also dissipated a lot, and it was no longer as fierce and dazzling. However, it didn't feel fatigue or pain at all. It exploded with its strongest power and slashed toward Ji Tianqing again. "Go to hell, you worm!" The blood god's son's angry roar came from the dark and cold demonic blade. Bang! The demonic blade exploded with destructive power and slashed Ji Tianqing, sending him flying for more than 10 miles. Fortunately, he used the golden wings at the critical moment to protect himself. The world-exterminating demonic blade slashed the golden wings, but it didn't hurt him. The powerful backlash sent the world-exterminating demonic blade flying. The few cracks on the demonic blade suddenly burst open, and countless cracks spread across the entire demonic blade. After a series of crisp cracking sounds, the world-exterminating demonic blade shattered into millions of blood-red fragments. Swish! With a flash of light, the blood-red fragments quickly gathered and turned into a blood-red giant hundreds of feet tall. It looked unscathed on the surface, but its strength was weakened by about 30%. "Kid, it's time for you to die. It's all over." It stared at Ji Tianqing, and scarlet flames of anger surged out of its body. Its figure flashed and rushed toward Ji Tianqing. Blood slaughtering the world. It waved its palm, and an earth-shattering blood-red light formed tens of thousands of blood-red giant blades that drowned out Ji Tianqing's figure. At this critical moment, Ji Tianqing was about to counterattack. Chapter 1575. The saber light, which was over 100 feet long, was dazzling and cold to the bone. It contained an extremely sharp chill. Ji Tianqing and the blood god were caught off guard and didn't expect that someone would suddenly intervene. Before the blood god could react, the lightning-like blade light that tore through the night sky viciously chopped its neck. Boom! With a muffled sound, blood god's neck was cut off by the saber light, and his head was separated from his body. The round head flew in the night sky, its eyes still wide open and its face ferocious. Although this injury was nothing to it, it could recover in an instant. It widened its eyes angrily and looked for the attacker. However, before it could clearly see the person wielding the blade, another lightning-like blade light tore through the night sky and suddenly attacked. Boom! With another muffled sound, its round head was split in half from the middle by the saber light, exploding into dozens of pieces of bloody light. Swish! 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 Then, one blade radiance after another lit up in the night sky. Each blade was faster than the previous one. The dazzling blade radiance was like lightning. Its power was violent and unbelievably fast. In just 2 breaths, the blood god had been cut 49 times. The gigantic body of 1,000 feet tall was actually chopped into pieces of bloody light by the saber light, falling down like snowflakes. Ji Tianqing didn't see the attacker until then. It was a young man in a black robe. His figure was tall and thin, and his hair was as black as ink. His face was thin and fierce, and his facial features were sharp and angular. He looked to be in his early 30s, handsome and cold. Especially those pitch-black eyes, they were narrow, long, and sharp like blades, and they flickered with peerlessly fierce sharpness. In his right hand, he held a 4-foot-long black blade. The blade was only 2 inches wide, sharp and narrow. Its shape was a bit strange. It looked like a blade and 70% like a sword. What a murderous, cold, and sharp young man in a black robe. What an ancient and mysterious saber with a threatening cold aura. Unfortunately, Ji Tianqing didn't know this young man in a black robe, nor had he seen him before. He could only feel that the young man in a black robe was surging with a murderous aura, just like the blade in his hand. At the same time, the pieces of bloody light scattered in the night sky quickly gathered together. The blood god still wanted to reform its body. Ji Tianqing made a prompt decision and rushed over. He waved his palm and released a divine white light that covered the sky. Swish! The sacred white light enveloped all the pieces of bloody light and quickly purified and devoured them. After a few seconds, the sacred white light retreated into his palm. The bloody light fragments all disappeared, and the second blood god's son was completely killed. Ji Tianqing withdrew his left hand, but didn't let down his guard. He looked at the young man in a black robe coldly. The young man in a black robe had already put away the black blade. He held the black scabbard and walked over expressionlessly. He didn't open his mouth to speak. Instead, he walked towards Ji Tianqing with each step, his eyes staring straight at him. Ji Tianqing secretly tightened his grip on the Heaven Barrier sword. His body was accumulating violent dermic powers, ready to unleash a thunderous attack at any time. He didn't know whether the young man in a black robe was a friend or a foe. He only knew that the young man in a black robe's blade technique was superb, and his strength was comparable to a powerhouse in the tribulation level. He was definitely a strong opponent. After 5 seconds, the young man in a black robe walked to 100 feet away from Ji Tianqing, but he didn't intend to stop. Ji Tianqing held the sword of the Burial of Heaven tightly and was about to attack. Just then, the young man in a black robe stepped forward and stood 10 steps away from him. An unbelievable scene took place. The young man in a black robe knelt down on one knee and bowed to him respectfully. "Greetings, master." Ji Tianqing was stunned and frowned in confusion. He had thought of many possibilities and guessed the identity and purpose of the young man in a black robe. But he didn't expect that the young man in a black robe would bow to him respectfully and call him master. However, he soon calmed down and looked at the young man in a black robe warily. "Why do you call me that? I don't know you." The young man in a black robe still knelt in front of him and maintained a respectful posture. "It's not important whether master has seen me or not. Master only needs to know that I have no malice towards you and will protect you with absolute loyalty." Ji Tianqing furrowed his brows, looked at him carefully, and asked, "What's your name? Why do you want to protect me?" The young man in a black robe calmly replied, "Subordinate Ji-bai is here to protect master under the order of my master." "Ji-bai?" Ji Tianqing raised his eyebrows and whispered, "Ji-bai defends the black." "Ji-bai defends the black." He frowned and thought for a moment and asked again, "Who is your master? Which force does he belong to? Why do you want to protect me for no reason?" "Please forgive me, master. I can't tell you my master's name and Taoist name." Ji-bai shook his head expressionlessly. From his spatial ring, he took out a token that seemed to be made of black iron and presented it with both hands. "Master said that as long as master sees my identity token, you will naturally understand." Ji Tianqing took the token with a heart full of doubts and looked at it in the palm of his hand. This token was only half the size of a palm, but it weighed 10,000 pounds. It was obviously made of meteoric iron and would not decay even after 10,000 years. On the back of the token, there were a few mysterious patterns engraved on it, forming a seemingly right but actually wrong pattern. But on the front of the token, there was a clear and mysterious pattern. In the circular pattern, there was a mountain peak that looked like a giant sword that stood between heaven and earth. Halfway up the mountain was a sea of clouds, and there was a bright moon on top of the mountain. When Ji Tianqing saw the pattern clearly, his face suddenly changed and he frowned. "Why do I feel that this pattern is familiar? I seem to have seen it somewhere before, and there is an inexplicable sense of familiarity." He held the token and frowned as he thought and searched desperately in his vast memory. After a long time, he suddenly remembered. Previously, when he was breaking through the love barrier at the God's Tear Lake, Kenshin's memory appeared in the depths of his soul. At that time, he was disguised as Kenshin and sat in the dojo at the Pillar of Heaven's Mountains, meditating under the Heaven Sword steel. A middle-aged man wearing a yellow Taoist robe led the bright moon to see him. At that time, on the stone steel at the edge of the dojo, there was such a pattern engraved. The middle-aged man's Taoist robe also had the same pattern embroidered on it. Without a doubt, that was the symbol of the Pillar of Heaven's Mountains dojo. Ji Tianqing suddenly realized and basically guessed Ji-bai's identity. However, another thought appeared in his mind. The Pillar of Heaven's Mountains is Kenshin's dojo. Back then, Kenshin challenged all the martial saints in the world there. On the Pillar of Heaven's Mountains, of course, there are forces under Kenshin. I didn't expect that after Kenshin had fallen for 1,000 years, the Pillar of Heaven's Mountains dojo had not been disbanded and there were still people walking in the world. Ji-bai and his master should be disciples of the Pillar of Heaven's Mountains. They probably mistook me for Kenshin. Chapter 1576. Ji Tianqing frowned and pondered for a long time, guessing a lot of information. He glanced at Ji-bai and found that Ji-bai was staring at him, observing his reaction. Seeing this scene, he couldn't help but reveal a playful smile and return the token to Ji-bai. Disciple of the Pillar of Heaven's Mountain? Ji-bai took the token with both hands, and a touch of excitement flashed in his eyes. But his face was indifferent, and his temperament had always been cold, so he didn't show any strange emotions. He nodded and said in a solemn tone, "Master, This subordinate is the sixth-generation disciple of the Pillar of Heaven's mountain. Ji Tianqing nodded slightly and asked, "How did you find me?" Ji Bai cupped his hands and answered truthfully, "A few months ago, the news that Master has the Sword of Burial of Heaven spread throughout the empires, and many top forces paid attention to it. After Master heard the news, he sent this subordinate to find you and secretly protect you. In the past few months, the royal families and top forces of various countries have sent experts to gather outside Mount God, waiting for an opportunity to snatch the Sword of Burial of Heaven. Just yesterday, there were 2 groups of people secretly following you, looking for an opportunity to make a move. However, they were all taken care of by this subordinate." Hearing this, Ji Tianqing raised his eyebrows and asked in a deep voice, "Then did you investigate which forces those 2 groups of people came from?" Ji Bai said indifferently, "The first group is from the royal family of the Deqian Empire, and the second group is from an assassin organization of the Lufeng Empire. The Deqian Empire, the Lufeng Empire, the White Knight Empire, the Thousand Snow Empire, and the Black Wings of the Azure Dragon Empire." Ji Tianqing's sneer deepened. "The 5 empires have all made a move." Ji Bai nodded and said, "A few months ago, this subordinate has investigated clearly. The news that you have the Sword of Burial of Heaven was deliberately released by the Chuyun Empire, and the mastermind behind it is the Great Emperor Chuyun." "The Great Emperor Chuyun?" Ji Tianqing frowned in confusion and asked, "Why would he do this? If he wants to snatch the Sword of Burial of Heaven, he can do it in the Chuyun Empire." Ji Bai explained, "Great Emperor Chuyun purposely spread the news, wanting the 5 empires to snatch the Sword of Burial of Heaven. For this reason, there will be chaos and slaughter, and he will reap the benefits. He is extremely ambitious. Not only does he want the Sword of the Burial of Heaven, but he also wants the territories of the various empires." "I see." Ji Tianqing came to a realization and sneered, "I was right. Great Emperor Chuyun is a despicable bastard." Ji Bai remained silent and did not reply. Ji Tianqing saw that he was still kneeling, so he said, "Get up and talk." "Many thanks, Master." Ji Bai straightened his body and stood to the side with a solemn expression. He carried the black treasured saber on his back, and his body was as straight as a sword. His entire body emitted a cold and sharp aura, like a sharp blade, as he loyally guarded Ji Tianqing. "Master, now that you've left Mount God Bestowment, experts from various countries are flocking here, waiting for an opportunity to snatch the sacred sword. Master, please return to Mount God Bestowment as soon as possible to avoid unnecessary danger. This subordinate will protect you in the dark and will definitely escort you safely back to Mount God Bestowment." Ji Tianqing glanced at him and chuckled, "If the experts of the 5 countries are all around, how can you protect me by yourself? Moreover, I'm cultivating on Mount God Bestowment, so it's not convenient for you to follow me." Ji Bai thought for a moment and replied, "Although this subordinate can't enter Mount God Bestowment, this subordinate will not leave Mount God Bestowment. As long as Master needs it, just give the order and this subordinate will appear immediately." "Forget it, we'll talk about this later." Ji Tianqing waved his hand and said with a playful smile, "Right now, I have something more important to do." Although Ji Bai's temperament and style, as well as his identity as a disciple of Pillar of Heaven's mountain, made him feel a sense of familiarity and trust. But he would not trust Ji Bai so easily. Not to mention, he already had a plan in mind that needed to be implemented. He took Ji Bai and left the ruins. After flying for 100,000 miles, he landed in a desolate and primitive mountain range. He chose 1,000 feet tall mountain and drilled into the mountain and quickly dug out a cave. Then, he spent a few hours to arrange a powerful defensive formation in the cave. After the formation was completed, he ordered Ji Bai, "Ji Bai, you stand guard outside the cave and protect me." Ji Bai immediately cupped his fists and said in a sonorous tone, "Master, please rest assured and heal your injuries. This subordinate will definitely not let anyone disturb you." Ji Tianqing just smiled and did not say anything. Ji Bai thought that after the battle with the blood god, he had suffered heavy injuries and needed to circulate his energy to heal. But in fact, what he wanted to do was something else. He sat cross-legged in the cave and immediately manipulated his primordial spirit to enter Kenshin's tomb. Swoosh! The primordial spirit golden sword turned into his appearance and appeared in front of the 18 mysterious tombstones. He reached out to the second tombstone on the right. The dark and cold tombstone suddenly lit up with a golden light and sucked him in. In the next moment, he entered a different space. It was the Divine Weapon Pavilion. He crossed the white jade stone bridge in the sea of clouds and walked to the 100-meter-tall golden pagoda. He reached out and pushed open the door of the Divine Weapon Pavilion. In the spacious and bright hall, the ground was engraved with a huge ancient formation. In the middle of the hall, there was a three-legged and four-cornered bronze cauldron. It was the ninth heaven cauldron. This was the second time he entered the Divine Weapon Pavilion. The last time he came, he found a lot of precious refining materials and let the burial of heaven smelt in the ninth heaven cauldron and successfully restored it to the primordial spirit level. But this time, he did not come to repair the burial of heaven. He walked to the ninth heaven cauldron and called out with his divine sense, "Burial of heaven, I need your help with something." Burial of heaven's voice immediately sounded in the hall. He asked in a low voice, "What's the matter?" Ji Tianqing's lips curled into a playful smile. He said meaningfully, "I want to use the ninth heaven cauldron to make a replica of the burial of heaven." Burial of heaven was a little confused and did not understand. "Tianqing, what are you trying to do?" Ji Tianqing explained, "Some bastard purposely spread the news that I have the burial of heaven, causing the experts of the 5 great empires to fight over it and put me in the center of the storm. Even if I stay on Mount God's ceiling and am safe for the time being, how can I just sit there and wait for death? I want to give him a big gift and give him a big surprise." Burial of heaven immediately understood what he meant and asked, "You want to create a fake burial of heaven to divert the trouble?" "That's right." Ji Tianqing nodded and said in a serious tone, "That bastard is a martial saint expert and has seen the burial of heaven with his own eyes. So, we have to achieve the effect of passing off the fake as the real thing." Burial of heaven said calmly, "That's a good idea. It should be easy for you to forge a primordial spirit level sword with the ninth heaven cauldron. It's not difficult to make the appearance of the sword exactly the same as the burial of heaven. The key is the spiritual aura and energy waves of the sword." Chapter 1577. For 5 consecutive days, Ji Tianqing stayed in the Divine Weapon Pavilion. He had stored a lot of materials for refining immortal soul magic treasures in his spatial ring. The secret techniques and techniques for forging immortal soul magic treasures were recorded in many books in the Heavenly Book Pavilion. Coupled with the powerful effects of the ninth heaven cauldron, it was easy for him to forge an immortal soul magic treasure sword. In just 5 days, he successfully forged an immortal soul magic treasure sword that was as black as ink. This magic treasure sword did not have a sword tip, and its appearance was exactly the same as the burial of heaven. There was almost no difference. Not only was the length and width the same, the patterns on the hilt and the blade were the same. Even the patterns on the fracture were exactly the same. Whether it was with the naked eye or divine sense, one could not see the difference between the two swords. The only difference between the two was the aura and energy fluctuation. The burial of heaven sword emitted a thick, ancient, and majestic aura. The sword had the aura of the soul, and the energy fluctuation was very mysterious and obscure. The whole sword seemed to have a life and soul. On the other hand, the counterfeit that Ji Tianqing smithied was lifeless and not lively at all. So, he left the magic treasure sword in the ninth heaven cauldron to continue forging, and asked the burial of heaven to help. The burial of heaven personally cast a spell to control the ninth heaven cauldron, and fused a wisp of his soul aura and a part of his vigorous mana into the magic treasure sword. After 2 days and 2 nights of forging, this magic treasure sword finally had the aura of the soul, and the energy fluctuation was exactly the same as the burial of heaven sword. Even if the fake and the burial of heaven sword were placed together, other than the burial of heaven and Ji Tianqing, no one would be able to tell the difference between the real and the fake. The fake sword that Ji Tianqing forged finally achieved the effect of passing off the fake as the real thing. He put away the fake sword with satisfaction and left the Kenshin tomb. Swoosh! Then his immortal soul returned to its original position, and he slowly stood up. After removing the defensive array of the cave, he walked out of the cave. Jibai was still standing guard outside the cave. His body was ramrod straight as he vigilantly monitored the surroundings. When he saw Ji Tianqing come out, he hurriedly went up to greet him. A wisp of worry flashed in his eyes as he asked, "Master, you've been in seclusion to recuperate for 7 days and 7 nights. Have you recovered?" He originally thought that Ji Tianqing would be fine and would be healed in a day or 2 at most. In the end, Ji Tianqing went into seclusion for 7 whole days. Of course, he was worried. "I've recovered. Let's go." Ji Tianqing waved his hand and led him out of the cave, flying into the sky. It was night, and the world was silent. The two of them streaked across the sky like phantoms, quietly heading southeast. After flying for tens of thousands of miles, Ji Bai noticed that they were going in the wrong direction. He hesitated for a moment before saying, "Master, this doesn't seem to be the way back to Mount God Bestowment." Ji Tianqing nodded and said with a smile, "Of course not. It's meaningless to go back to Mount God Bestowment now. The people of the 5 great empires won't give up until they get the sword of the burial of heaven. Even if I can return to Mount God Bestowment, I can't hide for long. It's also impossible to guard against them all the time." Ji Bai followed beside him and silently listened to his words. He asked, "Then master means?" "Go to the Chuyun Empire and have a good talk with the Chuyun Emperor." Ji Tianqing revealed a playful sneer. Ji Bai immediately frowned. A wisp of worry flashed in his long and sharp eyes. He knew that the Chuyun Emperor was a martial saint expert. Of course, he was worried about Ji Tianqing's decision. However, Ji Tianqing was his master. He had no right to deny his master's wishes. All he could do was strengthen his vigilance and guard, and do his best to protect Ji Tianqing. 20 days later, in the evening, Ji Tianqing successfully arrived at the Chuyun Empire's imperial city with Ji Bai. During the journey, the two of them encountered many obstacles and ambushes. They were also chased by experts from various empires and forces. However, they did their best to resolve the crisis and finally arrived at Heavenly Cloud City. Of course, they couldn't shake off the dozen or so groups of experts from various countries who were following them. Not long after the two of them entered Heavenly Cloud City, the dozen or so groups of experts from various countries quietly sneaked into the city. After entering the city, Ji Tianqing took out the sword of the burial of heaven from his space ring. Holding it tightly in his left hand, he swaggered toward the imperial palace. He didn't hide his identity and appearance at all. After passing through several busy streets, he arrived at the imperial palace's gate. As for Ji Bai, under his instructions, he hid after entering the city and secretly followed him. Under the majestic and solemn gate of the imperial palace, there were dozens of armored guards guarding it tightly. Ji Tianqing looked inside the imperial palace and shouted in a loud voice, "Ji Tianqing requests an audience with the Holy Emperor of Chuyun." His voice rumbled like muffled thunder above the imperial palace and spread throughout the imperial palace. Tens of thousands of people could hear him clearly. Ji Bai was hiding on a street 1,000 feet away from the imperial palace. He was sitting in a tea house and secretly observing the surroundings. These days, he had been hiding doubts and worries in his heart. He didn't know what Ji Tianqing was going to do. Now, when he saw Ji Tianqing enter the city with great fanfare and heard Ji Tianqing's loud shout, he couldn't help but ask, "Master, are you going to confront the Holy Emperor of Chuyun face to face?" Confront? Ji Tianqing's expression didn't change. He secretly communicated with him and said in a playful tone, "Why should I confront him? I'm here to give him a gift." A gift? Ji Bai was stunned. Suddenly, he thought of something and his expression changed. He asked, "Master, are you going to hand over the sword of burial of heaven?" Ji Tianqing said calmly, "Why not? The empires and countless powerful forces are not interested in me. Their goal is only the sword of burial of heaven. If I give the sword of burial of heaven to the great emperor of Chuyun in public, won't everything be solved? If the experts of the other countries want to snatch the sword of burial of heaven, it has nothing to do with me. They just need to find the great emperor of Chuyun." But Ji Bai anxiously tried to dissuade Ji Tianqing. However, before he could finish speaking, a captain of the imperial guards walked out of the palace gates and stopped in front of Ji Tianqing. The guard captain looked at Ji Tianqing and said in a dignified tone, "Young Master Ji, please come with me." After that, he wanted to bring Ji Tianqing into the imperial palace. Ji Tianqing shook his head and said expressionlessly, "There's no need to bring me into the imperial palace. Help me pass a message to the great emperor of Chuyun. Tell him that I have a big surprise for him." The guard captain frowned and glared at him coldly. He wanted to reprimand him for being disrespectful to the great emperor. But at this moment, a white-haired old man in a purple robe flew out of the imperial palace. The old man held a dark golden scroll in his left hand and a large black brush in his right hand. He exuded a wise and powerful aura. The guard captain quickly showed a respectful expression and bowed to the old man. "Greetings to the great emperor of Chuyun." The old man was the great emperor of the Chu-Yun Empire. He ordered with a dignified expression, "Quickly report this to the great emperor." The guard captain did not dare to delay, and quickly ran into the imperial palace. The great emperor looked at Ji Tianqing coldly and sized him up. The corner of his mouth hooked up into a cold smile. Chapter 1578. Chu-Yun clearly didn't come with good intentions. There was a hint of anger in his eyes. Ji Tianqing saw his attitude and guessed that he knew about what happened on Mount God's Seal. "Holy Master, I don't understand. I've done things with a clear conscience. Why wouldn't I dare return?" The sage master cracked a smile that didn't reach his eyes, and a cold light flashed through his deep eyes. "A clear conscience? I hope you don't regret it." Ji Tianqing didn't want to waste time with him. He simply turned his head and ignored him. The holy master didn't say anything else. He quietly waited for Chu-Yun to arrive. Although he wanted to kill Ji Tianqing, this reckless traitor of the Chu-Yun Empire, he couldn't do anything about it. However, he couldn't act on his own, lest he ruin great Emperor Chu-Yun's plan. As time passed, the sun slowly sank toward the horizon. The last of the dusky light disappeared. Martial artists and commoners gathered on the streets outside the palace gates. They gathered in twos and threes, looking at Ji Tianqing from afar. They pointed at him and whispered among themselves. He'd won 3 consecutive battles in the ranking battles and took first place. He'd left a deep impression on the people. A few months had passed, but the people of the imperial city were still talking about him. Not long after, a loud shout came from inside the palace. "The Holy Emperor has arrived." Following the captain's shout, a tall and burly figure stepped out of the palace gates. The leader was a middle-aged man with a dignified face. He wore a dark golden robe embroidered with images of the sun, moon, stars, and dragons. He was Chu-Yun, the Holy Emperor. The captain of the Imperial Guards and 4 other Imperial Guards followed behind him respectfully. The Holy Emperor strode toward Ji Tianqing. His eyes were cold and indifferent. When he got close, he stared at Ji Tianqing and asked in a dignified voice, "Ji Tianqing, why did you come back to Skycloud instead of cultivating on Mount God's Seal?" Ji Tianqing could feel the Holy Emperor's cold attitude toward him. There was even a hint of anger. However, he feigned ignorance. He smiled and cupped his hands in greeting. "Holy Emperor, I have returned to Skycloud to give you a great gift." The great emperor of the Chu-Yun Empire had heard the report from the Imperial Guard captain, so he naturally knew why Ji Tianqing was here. But in his eyes, Ji Tianqing was a poor man. What kind of gift could he give? Of course, other than the divine sword. What gift? The great emperor of the Chu-Yun Empire stared at him sharply, wondering what he was up to. Ji Tianqing held the sword of burial of heaven with both hands and said with a complicated tone, "Ever since I left the Chu-Yun Empire, I've been ambushed and besieged by mysterious powerhouses. I don't know why, but those people all want to snatch my sword. I'm guessing that there's something extraordinary about this sword, which is why so many experts are fighting over it. As for me, I just want to cultivate peacefully. I don't want to get into trouble, and I don't have the strength to defend against the attacks of so many experts. As the saying goes, a man's wealth is his own ruin. This sword is the cause of my misfortune. So I've decided to give it to you, Holy Emperor. Only a powerhouse like you is worthy of this sword." He spoke with sincerity, then presented the sword of burial of heaven to the great emperor of the Chu-Yun Empire. The great emperor and the sage master were stunned. They stared at the sword in his hand, a sharp light flashing in their eyes. Both of them carefully examined the sword, many thoughts running through their minds. Isn't this the sword of burial of heaven? The appearance, the aura, and the energy fluctuations are all the same. There's no difference. It really is the sword of burial of heaven. Ji Tianqing, that brat, wants to give the sword of burial of heaven to me? What is he trying to do? Has he seen through my plan? Is he forced to give me the sword of burial of heaven as a gesture of goodwill? With this brat's strength and methods, it's true that he can't fend off the attacks of the powerhouses of the various kingdoms. It's impossible for him to keep the sword of burial of heaven. He's smart enough. He knows that he can't keep the sword of burial of heaven, so he's giving it to you. He can stay out of this and curry favor with you. The great emperor of the Chu-Yun Empire remained silent. He looked at the sword of burial of heaven with greed. He weighed the pros and cons before reaching out to take the sword of burial of heaven. He nodded with a smile and said, "Yes, Ji Tianqing, you're really smart and tactful. As the saying goes, the treasures of heaven and earth belong to the virtuous. With your strength, you're indeed unable to protect this sword. Since you're so sincere and insist on giving the sword to me, I'll accept your goodwill. The great emperor of the Chu-Yun Empire held the sword of burial of heaven. His eyes shone as he examined it. He reached out to stroke the blade, feeling the energy fluctuations within. The sage master's expression was a little complicated. He secretly advised, "Sage master, although this kid is tactful and took the initiative to give the sword of burial of heaven to you, he'll reveal this publicly. However, if he were to present the treasure with great fanfare, this matter would definitely be exposed. If the news were to spread, the experts of various countries would definitely harm you. I'm very worried that this is Ji Tianqing's scheme." The great emperor of the Chu-Yun Empire didn't change his expression, but he secretly replied, "Don't worry, sage master. I've considered the consequences. I've also guessed that this might be Ji Tianqing's scheme. However, he's already delivered the sword of burial of heaven to the entrance of the palace and handed it to me. How can I give the sword of burial of heaven away? If the experts of the world find out, won't they laugh their heads off and call me cowardly and incompetent? So what if the experts of various countries find out? I have 1,000,000 elite soldiers and 100,000 imperial guards to protect the imperial city. Anyone who comes will die." The sage master was still a little worried, but he also understood that the great emperor of the Chu-Yun Empire had made up his mind and couldn't be changed. Moreover, who could resist the temptation of the sword of burial of heaven? If he could obtain the secrets of the sword of burial of heaven, Kenshin's treasures and divine Dao inheritance, so what if he became the public enemy of various countries? At this moment, the great emperor of the Chu-Yun Empire was in a good mood. He smiled and said, "Ji Tianqing is willing to offer the treasure and make a great contribution. I'll reward you with 10 million spiritual stones and 100 divine pills." As he spoke, he waved his hand and sent a ray of golden light to Ji Tianqing. The golden light wrapped around a space ring. Inside it were 10 million spiritual stones and 100 primordial soul-grade divine pills. Ji Tianqing didn't stand on ceremony. He reached out and took the space ring. He smiled and said, "Thank you, Sage Master. Since I've given you the gift, I'll take my leave now." The great emperor of the Chu-Yun Empire's thoughts were all on the sword of burial of heaven. He only wanted to return to the palace to study the sword as soon as possible. He couldn't be bothered to talk nonsense with Ji Tianqing. He waved his hand and said, "Go." Ji Tianqing cupped his hands and bowed, then turned and left. Soon, his figure disappeared at the end of the street. The smile on the great emperor of the Chu-Yun Empire's face disappeared. He ordered the sage master beside him, "Sage master, send someone to secretly watch him." The sage master asked telepathically, "Sage master, do you want to kill him?" The great emperor of the Chu-Yun Empire thought for a moment and shook his head. "Let him live for now. Perhaps I still have a use for him. Send someone to monitor his movements at all times and wait for my orders." Chapter 1579. Ji Tianqing had left the palace, but he did not leave the imperial city. He used a few tricks to change his appearance and hide in a hidden house. The sage master sent out more than 20 experts to search for him in the city, but they found nothing. That night, at 3 o'clock in the morning, it was the darkest moment before dawn, and also the quietest time of the day. But for some reason, the lights in the palace suddenly lit up, and there was a deafening sound. The muffled sound was like muffled thunder echoing in the night sky, spreading throughout the entire imperial city. All kinds of colorful magical brilliance emerged in the palace, illuminating the night sky like fireworks. Waves of violent shock waves spread out like ripples, hitting the various palaces and high walls of the palace. Occasionally, there would be a muffled explosion deep underground, shaking half of the city as if there was an earthquake. There was no doubt that there were experts fighting fiercely in the palace. In a short span of 100 breaths, there were 7 or 8 places where soul-stirring battles broke out. The dazzling magic lights and the primordial spirit Dharma idol shrouded the entire palace, and it could be seen clearly from 100 miles away. Not long after, the dozen or so defensive formations that shrouded the palace were all activated. Tens of thousands of imperial guards shouted and supported the defensive formations with all their strength. Suddenly, the entire palace was in chaos. The commoners around the palace were also awakened by the huge commotion of the battle. Countless people opened their doors and windows and looked in the direction of the palace, revealing a look of surprise and horror. Many people did not know what was going on, and they shouted anxiously and discussed this matter with each other. In the center of the city, in a hidden and old house, there was a 200-foot-tall pagoda in the courtyard. It was covered in dust and was a little shabby because no one cleaned and repaired it for many years. At this moment, Ji Tianqing was standing at the top of the pagoda, looking in the direction of the palace expressionlessly. He stood quietly, his body straight, and his figure seemed to be one with the night. The night wind blew, and his long hair fluttered. There was a faint sneer in his deep eyes. Half an hour later, the fighting in the imperial palace finally ceased. The brilliance of the spell that illuminated the night sky dissipated, and so did the loud, dull sound. When dawn arrived and the first glimmer of light appeared on the horizon, the imperial palace regained its tranquility, and the defensive formation was temporarily shut down. Ji Tianqing left the top of the pagoda and returned to the old house. He sat in the study and waited quietly for a quarter of an hour. Ji Bai, who was dressed in a black robe, appeared in the study room like a phantom. He respectfully bowed to him and reported the news. Reporting to Master, this subordinate has already found out the news. Speak. Ji Tianqing nodded. Ji Bai cupped his hands and reported. Just last night, the news of you giving the Sword of Burial of Heaven to Great Emperor Chu Yun has spread throughout the city. Many hidden forces in the city used all kinds of methods to spread the news. In the wee hours of the morning, more than 10 groups of experts broke into the imperial palace to gather information and attempt to snatch the Sword of Burial of Heaven. But those experts were discovered by the imperial palace guards, and a great battle broke out. Ji Tianqing had already expected this result, and was not surprised at all. He asked, "Did you find out the identity of those groups of people? What is the situation in the imperial palace?" Ji Bai reported expressionlessly. Some of the groups of experts followed us to Heavenly Cloud City and belonged to the various empires. There were also several groups of experts who seemed to be the top forces of the Chuyun Empire, but they hid their identities. Although those groups of people were killed or repulsed, the imperial palace suffered heavy losses. The number of casualties among the imperial palace guards is more than 5,000. Ji Bai's report was concise, but it was all essential and important. With just a few words, Ji Tianqing understood the situation in the imperial palace. After listening, he nodded slightly and said, "This is just the beginning, the best is yet to come." Ji Bai continued to keep an eye on the imperial palace and secretly gather information. This subordinate obeys. Ji Bai cupped his hands and bowed. After a moment of hesitation, he asked, "Master, this subordinate has a question. I don't know if I should ask?" Ji Tianqing raised an eyebrow. "Speak." Ji Bai asked cautiously through telepathy, "Master, the Heaven Burier sword you gave to Great Emperor Chu Yun should be fake, right?" This question had been hidden in his heart all night. He still couldn't believe that his master would give away the real Sword of Burial of Heaven. Ji Tianqing's lips curled into a smile, and he said in a playful tone, "You're not too stupid. You barely qualify to be my follower." Such a reluctant praise, but it made Ji Bai's eyes shine with pride and excitement. "Master is too kind. Go." Ji Tianqing said no more and waved his hand, indicating that he should leave. Ji Bai bowed and left, continuing to gather information in the imperial city and secretly monitor the imperial palace's movements. Over the next few days, Heavenly Cloud City was filled with noise and chaos. There were many rumors circulating in the city, causing panic among the people. It was said that someone saw Ji Tianqing return with their own eyes. Moreover, he presented a black sword to the Chuyun Emperor outside the gates of the imperial palace. That night, a large number of mysterious experts secretly infiltrated the imperial palace and fought fiercely with the palace guards. Early the next morning, the entire imperial city entered a state of martial law. 100,000 palace guards and hundreds of thousands of city guards were fully armed to the teeth to protect the imperial city and the imperial palace. Even the streets and alleys of the imperial city were patrolled by groups of guards, searching for suspicious people. Every night, there was a great battle inside and outside the imperial palace. The earth-shattering noise and the dazzling brilliance of spells always woke up all the warriors and civilians in the city. The imperial city was filled with a somber and oppressive atmosphere, and everyone's heart was shrouded in a layer of haze. The gates of the imperial city were tightly shut, forbidding the people from entering or leaving. Everyone could only stay in their homes, and even during the day they didn't dare to go out at will. No one knew why the most prosperous imperial city had become like this. No one knew how long such a dangerous situation would last before it ended. Over the past few days, Ji Tianqing had been hiding in the old house and had not gone out at all. He kept a close eye on the imperial palace and listened to Ji Bai's reports every day. As time passed, the imperial palace's situation grew worse. Every day, hundreds of battles broke out in the city, and at least thousands of city guards and guards were killed. More and more mysterious experts secretly infiltrated the imperial city, waiting for an opportunity to strike. Among these mysterious experts were not only members of the imperial family, but also experts from the top powers of each country. Even the top powers of the Chu Empire sent large groups of experts to quietly infiltrate the imperial city. Heavenly Cloud City became more chaotic and dangerous. Chapter 1580. Unknowingly, 9 days had passed. The chaos that had lasted for 9 days had caused Heavenly Cloud City to become unstable, and everyone was in danger. The millions of warriors and civilians in the city were already planning how to escape from the imperial city. Inside and outside the imperial palace, there were ruins and pits everywhere. The ground was also covered with ravines. Even the number of palace guards and city guards was rapidly decreasing. More than half of them had been killed or injured. Ji Tianqing, on the other hand, seemed to have been forgotten by the experts of the various countries. He had been meditating and cultivating in the courtyard. Ji Bai reported the latest news to him every day. The information he had was more accurate and detailed. He knew very well that the experts sent by the various empires and forces were mostly in the primordial spirit realm and tribulation realm. Those people could only inquire about the news of the burial of heaven. They could not find Great Emperor Chu Yun, let alone see the burial of heaven with their own eyes. Now, most of those experts had been killed. The various empires and top forces had sent more people and stronger experts to Heavenly Cloud City to snatch the burial of heaven. In recent days, most of the experts who had sneaked into Heavenly Cloud City were at least in the 5th level of the Tribulation Realm. There were even 2 martial sage experts who had come to Heavenly Cloud City. Ji Tianqing could guess that Great Emperor Chu Yun would not be able to hold on for long if he did not have any tricks up his sleeve. Soon, it was late at night again. The situation was just as he had expected. Just like the previous 9 days, a great battle had broken out in the Imperial Palace. A large number of experts had sneaked into the Imperial Palace to secretly search for the whereabouts of the burial of heaven. After being discovered by the palace guards and the experts of the Imperial Palace, the 2 sides engaged in a fierce battle. Dazzling magical brilliance illuminated the dark night and enveloped the entire Imperial Palace. Deafening loud noises reverberated in the sky above the Imperial Palace. There were also waves of shouts and battle cries coming from the Imperial Palace. Violent shockwaves spread out, destroying the Imperial Palace's defensive array and the surrounding tall palace walls. Half of the Imperial Palace shook, as if there was a super earthquake. In the area closer to the Imperial Palace, a large number of houses collapsed and turned into a pile of brick ruins. Ji Tianqing could clearly feel that tonight's battle was fiercer and fiercer than the previous few days. He could even sense the aura of a martial sacred realm expert coming from the palace. It seems that the royal palace will be destroyed by the flames of war tonight. He stood at the top of the tower and looked in the direction of the Imperial Palace, murmuring expressionlessly. As expected, about an hour later, the Imperial Palace was set ablaze. Many palaces and residences that had not been damaged were burned to ashes by the fire. Countless palace maids and guards screamed in fear and despair as they fled the Imperial Palace in a panic. Half of the Imperial Palace turned into a sea of fire. All kinds of chaotic noises shook the entire Imperial city. Everyone knew that something big had happened in the palace. After tonight, the Chuyan Empire would definitely experience a huge upheaval and change. Finally, for hours passed. It was daybreak. The battle within the palace gradually came to a stop. The earth-shattering explosions and the dazzling brilliance of mana gradually dissipated. Only the raging fire continued to burn until the morning sun rose. Only then did it gradually weaken and extinguish. Billowing thick smoke covered the sky, blocking the rising sun from the east. It also shrouded the hearts of the people in the city with a layer of haze. The guards and defensive forces in the imperial palace seemed to have collapsed. A large number of mysterious experts went on a killing spree in the imperial palace, wantonly slaughtering the palace maids, guards, and concubines in the harem. They searched all the palaces, even the secret chambers and underground palaces hidden underground, frantically searching for something. Not long after, the various gates of the imperial city were also broken by the experts of various countries. More than half of the city guards guarding the gates were killed. Those who were lucky enough to survive scattered in all directions, utterly defeated. The experts of various empires and forces took advantage of the chaos to burn, kill, and loot in the city, wantonly plundering wealth. The people in the city fell into a desperate situation and fled one after another. For a time, the people who fled the imperial city with their families blocked several city gates. Ji Tianqing stayed in the courtyard, sitting in the study, patiently waiting. It wasn't until late in the morning that Ji Bai rushed back, looking tired. After entering the study, he bowed to Ji Tianqing and reported, "Master, the imperial palace has been destroyed by the war and turned into a scorched ruin. The experts of various empires and forces are slaughtering the royal family in the imperial palace, frantically searching for the whereabouts of the sword of the burial of heaven. In addition, a large number of experts are burning, killing, and looting in the city. Heavenly Cloud City is in complete chaos." Ji Tianqing nodded slightly, frowning in confusion, and asked, "Although all the empires and forces have gathered here, and even the martial saints have been mobilized, but this is not enough to destroy the imperial palace. Why didn't Emperor Clued and the sage teacher appear?" A strange look flashed in Ji Bai's eyes, and he said in a low voice, "According to my investigation, last night Emperor Clued took the sage teacher, the empress, and the crown prince and fled Heavenly Cloud City." Suddenly hearing this news, Ji Tianqing's face changed, and his eyes revealed a look of disbelief. "Is this true?" Ji Bai nodded and said in a serious tone, "It's true." Ji Tianqing suddenly understood, and nodded slightly. "So that's how it is. No wonder the battle in the imperial palace last night was so long, and the entire imperial palace was destroyed. No wonder the experts of various countries wantonly slaughtered in the imperial palace, burning, killing, and looting in the city, but Emperor Clued and the sage teacher did not appear to stop them. I really didn't expect Emperor Clued to be so bold, to be willing to give up the imperial palace for the sword of the burial of heaven. It seems that this guy is really willing to pay any price for the sword of the burial of heaven, almost to the point of madness." At this point, a mocking sneer appeared on his face, and he said in a contemptuous tone, "Unfortunately, he was blinded by impulse and lost his reason for the sword of the burial of heaven. One day in the future, when he knows the truth, I'm afraid he will vomit blood from regret, right?" Ji Bai was silent for a moment, and then said in a calm voice, "The burial of heaven is the greatest sword in the world, and the mysteries and significance it contains are more important than a divine kingdom. Any war saint would give up an entire kingdom for the sword of the burial of heaven." Ji Tianqing nodded and said, "Therefore, this is also the reason why my plan could succeed. Emperor Clued was blinded by greed and made such an absurd decision. Even if the imperial palace was destroyed in the flames of war and Skycloud City was destroyed, he only had himself to blame. From the beginning, he had ulterior motives and used tricks to frame me. Now that he's fallen, he deserves it." Ji Bai nodded in agreement and asked, "Master, what do we do next?" Ji Tianqing thought for a moment, then smiled. "Skycloud City is in chaos, and Emperor Clued has fled. My revenge has been avenged, and the crisis has been resolved." Chapter 1581. Chuyan Empire. 1,000,000 miles away from the imperial city, there was a vast and desolate mountain range. At this moment, a faint golden light streaked across the sky like lightning, flying all the way to the south. The golden light enveloped an exquisite and luxurious dragon carriage, pulled by 8 Pegasus with snow-white wings. The huge dragon carriage was made of precious star true gold and inlaid with tens of thousands of pearls and precious gems. Although there were no guards of honor around the dragon carriage, it still had a noble and sacred aura. The dragon carriage was 100 feet wide and could accommodate more than 10 people. Among them, there was a dazzling hall with an exquisite and luxurious throne placed in it. Emperor Chu Yun, who was wearing a dark golden dragon robe, sat on the throne with a gloomy expression, frowning as he pondered. At this moment, the sage master, who was holding a book and a large brush, quickly walked to the throne and reported respectfully, "Sage Emperor, we're already 1,000,000 miles away from the imperial city. I've checked just now, and there's no abnormality in the surrounding 100 miles. No one is following us." Emperor Chu Yun's thoughts were interrupted. He nodded expressionlessly and said, "We can't let down our guard. Continue to monitor the surroundings. We'll leave the imperial city secretly and must hide our tracks. We can't be discovered." "I understand." The sage master nodded. After hesitating for a moment, he asked, "Sage Emperor, although the experts from various countries have gathered in the imperial city, including 2 martial saints, they all want to snatch the sword of burial of heaven. However, if we give up the imperial city so easily, it will definitely fall and even cause the entire empire to fall apart. Do you really not regret it?" Emperor Chu Yun glanced at him and shook his head with a cold smile. "I never regret my actions. Soon, you'll understand that a mere empire is not worth mentioning compared to the secret of the sword of burial of heaven." The sage master nodded slightly and didn't reply. Emperor Chu Yun continued, "Also, you have to understand that I didn't give up the imperial city because I'm afraid of death. The 2 martial sages and the hundreds of tribulation-passing experts are not enough to threaten my life. I just don't want to stay in the imperial city and be harassed by those clowns. They would never give up until they obtained the sword of the burial of heaven. I'm heading south to find an absolutely secluded place to study the mysteries of the burial of heaven's sword. After I decipher the secrets of the sword of burial of heaven, I still have to search for the legendary Kenshin tomb. Once I obtain Kenshin's treasures and Kenshin's inheritance, it will only be a matter of time before I break through to the martial god realm." At this point, Great Emperor Chu Yun was in high spirits. Murderous intent surged in his eyes, and his entire body exuded a domineering aura. "Once this emperor becomes the 4th martial god, I'll definitely annihilate those 5 great empires with my own hands and slaughter them until the sun and moon lose their light to take revenge for what happened today." The sage sovereign was also affected by his aura, and his eyes were filled with strong anticipation. He nodded and said, "I believe that the sage sovereign will definitely achieve his wish and become the new divine master." At the same time, Ji Tianqing and Ji Bai quietly left the city. Once they were far away from the imperial city, Ji Tianqing summoned Black Dragon. Black Dragon carried the 2 of them and flew across the sky at lightning speed, rushing back to Mount Godseal. Ji Tianqing sat on Black Dragon's back and meditated with his eyes closed, silently cultivating. Ji Bai was like a sharp sword, standing straight behind him, guarding him like a shadow. Although this was the first time Ji Bai had seen Shinran, he was quite shocked and excited. However, he was calm and wise and did not show any abnormal emotions. In his mind, his mysterious and powerful master had unlimited potential and possibilities. It was normal for him to create miracles. Only a noble Shinran was worthy of being his master's mount. Unknowingly, 20 days passed. Black Dragon hurried day and night, while Ji Tianqing meditated and cultivated, consolidating his martial arts realm. The journey was very peaceful, even a little dull and boring. Sure enough, the experts of the various countries ignored Ji Tianqing. No one followed or pursued him. Apart from a few ignorant demonic beasts that launched a few attacks on the Black Dragon, the Black Dragon was still alive. But those were trivial matters not worth mentioning. There was no need for Ji Tianqing to act. Ji Bai easily took care of them with a draw of his sword. One evening, as the sun set, Black Dragon finally returned to the foot of Mount Godseal. Ji Tianqing ended his meditation, opened his eyes, and stood up. He stood on Black Dragon's back, looking down at the valley and the earth below, and ordered Ji Bai, "Ji Bai, stay at the foot of Mount Godseal and wait for my orders." Ji Bai respectfully cupped his hands and nodded. As master commands, Ji Bai will take his leave. With that, he turned and left Black Dragon's back. His figure flashed a few times and disappeared into the sea of clouds. Ji Tianqing returned Black Dragon to the world inside the sword and leisurely returned to the peak of Mount Godseal. Mount Godseal was very quiet, and there were no signs of the geniuses of the various countries. He didn't need to guess to know that they were still training in the 3,000 worlds. Calculating the time, there were about 4 or 5 days left before the training ended. He quietly returned to Heaven Saint Palace and entered a secret room to cultivate. This time, he left Mount Godseal, first went to Godtier Lake, and then returned to Chu Yun Empire, which delayed him for more than 50 days. Now that he finally returned to Heaven Saint Palace, he could finally rest in peace for a few days. 4 days passed in a flash. On the morning of the 5th day, some young geniuses walked out of the Clear Sky Pagoda. These young geniuses had just finished their training in the secret realm. Most of them had injuries on their bodies, and there were still bloodstains on their robes. Some of them had more serious injuries, and their bodies were covered in blood. Their faces were pale, and their auras were very weak. There were even some whose injuries had reached a shocking degree. They had either broken an arm or lost a leg. Clearly, Great Guardian's words were not alarmist. Training in the secret realm was equivalent to actual combat, and it was very dangerous. Although many of the geniuses were injured, they were all very excited, and their faces had excited and gratified smiles. These people had all obtained benefits in the secret realm. Some broke through bottlenecks and increased their strength. Some obtained fortuitous opportunities and rare treasures or cultivation resources. Only a few people had gloomy expressions, and they looked dejected and pessimistic. These people either failed in their training or did not have enough fortuitous opportunities and did not gain anything. After all, there were many people who participated in the secret realm's training, and not everyone could gain anything. Everyone's strength, wisdom, and aptitude were different, and their luck and fortuitous opportunities were also different. A few hours later, it was noon. More than 50 young geniuses walked out of the Clear Sky Pagoda, one after another. They did not return to their residences, and they all gathered in the square below the pagoda, looking at the huge stone tablet in the middle of the square. Great Guardian had said that after the training in the secret realm ended, everyone's results would be displayed on the stone tablet. Chapter 1582. An entire day passed. In the evening, everyone's training had ended. More than 90 young geniuses gathered under the stone tablet. Everyone whispered to each other as they waited patiently for the list to appear. The last few geniuses to walk out of the Clear Sky Pagoda were Jiang Ningxue, Song Zhanyu, and Qin Songqiong. Back then, they had chosen the Purple Mystery Realm, which was of the highest difficulty. Apart from the three of them, there were 2 other geniuses in the top 10 who had also chosen the Purple Mystery Realm. However, the 2 of them ended up in a miserable state. When the 2 of them walked out of the Clear Sky Pagoda, they were covered in blood and wounds. One of them had both his arms broken while the other had lost a leg. Without a doubt, the 2 of them did not obtain any opportunities or treasures. When everyone saw the miserable state of the 2 of them, they were worried about the results of Qin Songqiong and the other 2. However, when the 3 of them walked out of the Clear Sky Pagoda one after another, many geniuses were shocked and found it unbelievable. Jiang Ningxue looked tired. Her white dress was a little messy and stained with dried blood. There were also a few wounds on her body. However, she exuded a cold, murderous aura. Her eyes were bright and sharp, and her strength and aura were much stronger. Obviously, she had gained a lot from this training, and her strength had improved. Song Zhanyu's situation was very similar to Jiang Ningxue's. His clothes were tattered and stained with blood. However, he was in high spirits and his eyes were shining. His strength had improved as well. Qin Songqiong's situation was the most unique. When he walked out of the Clear Sky Pagoda, his clothes were intact and he looked no different from when he entered the Mystery Realm. However, the geniuses from various countries knew that Qin Songqiong was the #1 genius and would definitely be able to pass the Purple Mystery Realm. He would definitely gain a lot. However, before the experiential ranking appeared, no one knew what his gains were. Finally, everyone gathered in the square. The black stone tablet that was 1,000 feet tall lit up with a dense white light, and more than 90 lines of large characters appeared on it. The list had finally appeared. More than 90 young geniuses were all in high spirits. They stared at the list and quickly read the lines of words. After a moment of silence, the crowd burst into exclamations and discussions. Wow! The list's information is so detailed. It even has a corresponding ranking. Jiang Ningxue, ranked 3rd on the experience roll. Her strength has risen to the peak of the 6th Firmament Essence Soul Realm. In the 5 Absolute Cloud Summit, she had broken through 27 great formations and killed 320 illusory spirits. In this trial, she has obtained a low-grade Tribulation Level 5 Extinction Scripture and 12 Supreme-grade Nascent Divinity Secret Pills. The crowd immediately turned to look at Jiang Ningxue when they heard the exclamation. Jiang Ningxue was surrounded by the geniuses of the Thousand Snow Empire. She proudly stared at the stone tablet with a faint smile on her face. Many young geniuses revealed expressions of envy and jealousy as they sighed with emotion. Oh my God! She actually obtained a tribulation-grade secret technique and 12 supreme-grade primordial spirit secret pills. The purple word mystery realm is indeed extraordinary. It actually gave out such generous rewards. When we train in the blue word secret realm, very few of us are rewarded with secret arts. Even if we do get them, they are only superior grade or supreme grade primordial spirits. Everyone look. The one in second place is Song Jianyu. His gains are even richer. When the crowd heard the exclamation of one of the geniuses, their gazes were focused on the second row of words. Immediately, someone read aloud in an envious tone, Song Jianyu, ranked second on the trial list. His strength has increased to the peak of the 6th level primordial spirit realm. In the Thunderfire Grand Canyon, he broke through 12 illusions and maze formations, explored 19 Thunderfire caves, and killed 82 Thunderfire spirit beasts. In this trial, he obtained a mid-grade tribulation-level Thunderfire Divine Fist and 18 supreme-grade nascent divinity secret pills. Hearing this, countless geniuses were shocked, and their eyes were filled with envy. Oh my God! It's actually a mid-grade tribulation-level secret technique. Thunderfire Divine Fist. It's actually a secret technique that can control lightning. His combat strength will definitely soar. The Great Guardian did not lie to us. The rewards of the trial in the secret realm are simply too generous. It's a pity that the most generous rewards are hidden in the purple word mystery realm. Ordinary people like us are not qualified to obtain them at all. As the discussions broke out, everyone's gazes were focused on the first row of words at the highest point of the stone tablet. When the crowd saw the words clearly, they were extremely shocked. Many of them were dumbfounded and petrified. Qin Songqiong, ranked first on the trial list. His strength has broken through to the 7th level primordial spirit realm. In the primordial battlefield, he went through 36 impregnable passes, fought 48 bloody battles, and killed more than 200 primordial fighting souls. In this trial, he obtained a high-grade tribulation-level secret technique, Heavenly Blade, 20 supreme-grade nascent divinity secret pills, and a low-grade tribulation-level fighting soul armor. The crowd was stunned for a long time before they gradually recovered from their shock. Countless people gasped and turned to look at the edge of the square where Qin Songqiong was sitting on the roof of the palace. Qin Songqiong was leaning against the cornice of the roof. He carried the heavenly blade on his back and held a flagon of wine in his hand. He looked calm as he drank. It was as if he only had eyes for the blade and wine. He completely ignored the gazes of the crowd. A commotion broke out in the crowd. Many geniuses sighed with mixed emotions. Qin Songqiong is indeed the #1 genius. He actually made a breakthrough in the secret zone and reached the 7th level of the primordial soul realm. The Heavenly Blade, a high-grade tribulation-level secret technique, is definitely a priceless treasure. Not only did he obtain the Heavenly Blade, but he also obtained a low-grade tribulation-level fighting soul armor. Among all the people who participated in the trial, only he obtained a tribulation-level fighting soul armor. With the Heavenly Blade and the fighting soul armor, his combat strength is close to the peak of the primordial soul realm. I'm afraid he is invincible among his peers. There is only one more month to the God-Disciple assessment. It seems like there is no doubt about the result. Qin Songqiong is definitely the #1 genius. Just as everyone was filled with amazement and lamentation, someone suddenly shouted in confusion, why are there only 98 names on the trial list? Could it be that there are 2 people who did not enter the secret zone? Hearing this, many geniuses counted the names on the trial list and found that there were indeed 2 people missing. I know. It's Ji Tianqing. Ji Tianqing did not participate in the trial in the secret zone. Yes, not only Ji Tianqing, but Enwuk as well. Are the 2 of them stupid? The rewards for the trial in the secret zone are so plentiful. Why did they not participate? Enwuk is just an insignificant character. It doesn't matter if he participates in the trial or not. However, Ji Tianqing is the son of God. Why didn't he participate in the trial in the secret zone? Everyone had mixed feelings as they whispered to each other. Chapter 1583. Everyone knew that the trial in the Mystery Land was a great opportunity. Most people would gain a lot, and the talented geniuses would get secret skills and treasures. The trial results of Qin Songqiong and Song Jianyu were the best proof. If a peerless genius like Ji Tianqing, the son of God, had participated in the trial in the Mystery Land, he would have gained a lot as well. However, he did not participate in the trial. The young geniuses from various countries were talking about this. After Ji Tianqing became the son of God, he became more arrogant than before. That's right. This guy did not even participate in the trial in the Mystery Land. He is either too arrogant or too conceited. I think he is living in the Heaven Saint Palace and enjoying the best treatment. He has lost his fighting spirit and drive. So what if he is the son of God? Qin Songqiong and Song Zhanyu's strength has increased greatly. They can easily defeat him. In a month's time, it is unknown whether Ji Tianqing can make it to the top 5 in the God-disciple assessment. If the son of God can't even make it to the top 5, it will be ridiculous. All kinds of complicated discussions rose one after another in the crowd. Most of the geniuses were disdainful of Ji Tianqing's stupidity and arrogance. They were gloating over his misfortune. Everyone was waiting to see Ji Tianqing make a fool of himself in the God-disciple assessment in a month's time. Jiang Ningxue stood in the crowd, surrounded by the geniuses of the Thousand Snow Empire. She was noble and dazzling. She looked indifferently in the direction of the Heaven Saint Palace as a cold sneer flashed in her eyes. She thought to herself, Ji Tianqing, you're truly conceited. To think that you wouldn't even participate in the trial of the secret realm. In a month's time, I will defeat you and trample you under my feet in the God-disciple assessment. When that time comes, I will return the words you said to me back to you without changing a single word. It is not that I am not worthy of you, but that you are not worthy of me. Not far away, a group of young geniuses from the White Knight Empire surrounded Song Zhanyu, congratulating him and flattering him. Song Zhanyu was the leader of the dozen or so geniuses. Now that he had obtained such a huge harvest, his strength had improved greatly. It could be said that he was flushed with success. He also looked in the direction of Heaven Saint Palace, his eyes cold and indifferent as he calculated in his heart. This brat is truly vigilant. In order to protect the sword of burial of heaven, he actually holed himself up in the Heaven Saint Palace, even giving up on training in the mystic realms. He's already suspicious. I'm afraid it'll be even harder for me to find a chance to seize the sword of burial of heaven. While the geniuses of the various countries were discussing, the chief guardian led the 6 god emissaries to the square. Everyone immediately quieted down and bowed in unison. Greetings, Great Guardian. The Great Guardian led the 6 divine envoys to the center of the square. His expression was solemn as he said in a dignified tone, "The trial in the arcane realm has come to an end, and the results of everyone's trial have been announced on the trial list. In this trial in the arcane realm, most of the disciples have obtained great gains and improved their strength. I'm deeply gratified by this. However, I would like to announce something now, and I hope that everyone will be mentally prepared." Hearing his words, the young geniuses' expressions turned solemn. Their eyes were filled with anticipation. Most of them guessed that the news that the chief guardian was going to announce must be related to the God-disciple examination. After all, they had been in Mount God for 5 months, and there was only 1 month left before the God-disciple examination. After a moment of silence, the chief guardian announced with a dignified expression, 2 days later, there will be a ranking battle in Mount God. It will be held in the square outside the temple. This ranking battle is very important, and it will affect everyone's future. Those who are ranked in the top 50 can continue to stay in Mount God to train and wait for the God-disciple examination. Those who are ranked below 50 will be sent to the Arctic Abyss to work in the Glacier Divine Mine. Everyone only has 2 days to rest, so please do your best to prepare for the battle. Hearing this news, many young geniuses were shocked and puzzled as they burst into a discussion. Gosh, I thought it was about the God-disciple examination. I didn't expect it to be a ranking battle. What ranking battle? Why haven't I heard of it? It has never happened before. Those who are ranked below 50 will be sent to the Glacier Divine Mine to work? How can this be? Even those who are eliminated should be sent to the Holy Kingdom to be divine servants. Chief Guardian, this is not fair. We still have 1 month before the examination. Now that there is a ranking battle, our futures will be decided a month in advance. This is not fair. It is said that the Arctic Abyss is a very dangerous place. I have heard of the Glacier Divine Mine before. It is said that there are countless slaves and divine servants in that huge and dangerous divine mine. They mine divine stones day and night for the divine master. Oh no! Those who are ranked below 50 will be sent to the Glacier Divine Mine to work and lose their freedom like slaves. Why? Why is there a ranking battle in advance? Please take back your order, Chief Guardian. This is not fair to us. The young geniuses from various countries were filled with anxiety and fear, and they looked uneasy. Everyone whispered to each other and voiced their dissatisfaction and doubts. The Chief Guardian scanned the crowd sternly and raised his hands to signal for everyone to quiet down. Everyone, this ranking battle is indeed held at the last minute. It has never happened in the previous God-disciple selections. But this is an order from the God Kingdom, a decree from the God Lord, and we can only obey it. Everyone, there is no need to say anything more. Go back and prepare for the battle. I wish everyone good luck. With that, the Chief Guardian led the 6 divine envoys and left the square. The young geniuses from various countries stood in the square with complicated expressions. They gathered together to discuss this matter and were unwilling to leave for a long time. Apart from the top 10 geniuses, most of them were very worried. Their faces were filled with fear and uneasiness. It wasn't until an hour later, when night fell, that the crowd gradually dispersed. At the same time, in the east courtyard of Heaven Saint Palace, Ji Tianqing was sitting upright in the secret chamber, meditating and cultivating with full concentration. Previously, he had been cultivating the 3rd level of the Sword Soul Tao and had already consolidated his martial foundation. After breaking through to the 6th level of the Primordial Soul Realm, he could cultivate the 4th level of the cultivation technique. Therefore, after returning to Heaven Saint Palace, he entered Kenshin's tomb and checked the mysterious tombstone. The words on the 3rd tombstone on the right had indeed disappeared. On the 4th tombstone, there were a few lines of ancient words that recorded the 4th level of the Sword Soul Tao. Only 4 days had passed in the outside world. He had been cultivating in the secret chamber for 20 days, comprehending the mysteries of the 4th level of the cultivation technique. Chapter 1584. The 4th level of the Path of the Sword Soul was very profound and difficult to understand. With Ji Tianqing's strength and talent, it would take him 2 months to comprehend it. However, for some unknown reason, he managed to comprehend it after cultivating for half a month. At this moment, he was cultivating the 4th level of the Path of the Path. He followed the mysterious and special route and continuously circulated his powers to nourish his primordial spirit. After half a month of cultivation, he could clearly feel that the power of his primordial spirit was increasing and the strength of his physical body was also increasing. Furthermore, he had cultivated the Heaven and Earth Dharma body secret skill, and the potential and limits of his physical body were also increasing. His strength was increasing steadily. Suddenly, he vaguely heard some voices in his mind. He was stunned and thought doubtfully, "That's strange. No one is transmitting messages to me, and there is no one else in the secret chamber. How can I hear voices?" He hurriedly stopped cultivating and calmed down to listen carefully. Soon he found some clues. Someone was talking in a low voice, and the source of the voice was in the secret chamber of the Heaven Sage Palace West Courtyard. A low and majestic voice was saying, "The ranking battle came too suddenly, and many disciples are not mentally prepared. Messengers, please calm them down." Then the voices of a few middle-aged men and elders were heard. "Great Guardian, please rest assured that we will calm the disciples down. We will do as you say." Ji Tianqing was not unfamiliar with these voices. He immediately recognized that the people who were talking were the Great Guardian and the 6 messengers. They seemed to be discussing something important. At this moment, another gentle and benevolent voice was heard. "Great Guardian, what is going on with the ranking battle this time? This has never happened in the previous Disciple of God selections. Is there a problem with the Glacier Divine Mine?" Ji Tianqing was very familiar with this voice. It was the voice of the 3rd Guardian, Hong Qingtian. He heard it clearly and instantly frowned. He murmured doubtfully, "What ranking battle? Why is it related to the Glacier Divine Mine?" At this moment, the other messengers also chimed in and asked the Great Guardian what was going on. The Great Guardian was silent for a moment before he said in a heavy tone, "Everyone, I can tell you the reason for the ranking battle. However, everyone must keep it a secret. You must not leak it out to avoid causing panic among the disciples." Hong Qingtian and the other divine envoys agreed in unison, expressing that they would keep it a secret. Only then did the Great Guardian relax. He said in a low voice, "Everyone's guess is right. There is indeed a problem with the divine glacier mine. In the past month, many people had gone missing or died in the Ice Mountain divine mine. Their deaths were horrifying, and their causes of death were bizarre. Every day, hundreds of slaves and miners would lose their lives. Even the overseers would lose 3 to 5 divine servants every day. In just over 20 days, more than 10,000 miners had died, and more than 100 divine servants had died mysteriously. Currently, the Ice Mountain divine mine was short of manpower. Everyone was in a state of panic. It was almost impossible for them to mine the mine normally. Therefore, the frozen martial monarch guarding the divine mine sent me a secret letter, requesting God Bestowment Mountain to send a group of divine servants to fill the vacancy as soon as possible. Hearing the great guardian's words, everyone came to a sudden realization. The divine envoys began to discuss in a heavy tone and raised many questions. The divine glacier mine is guarded by a large number of elite guards. The slaves and miners aren't mortals either. They all have the strength of a soul refinement realm cultivator. Moreover, the overseer's divine servants have all reached the primordial spirit realm. No matter what, it's impossible for such a thing to happen there. Great Guardian, such a thing happened in the divine glacier mine. Did the frozen martial monarch not investigate carefully? What exactly caused it? As everyone knows, the divine glacier mine is a forbidden area and also an important industry under the divine master. Every year, that divine mine produces a huge amount of divine stones to supply the divine nations, God Bestowment Mountain, and several forbidden areas. I really can't figure out who is so daring as to commit murder in the divine glacier mine. A moment later, when the discussion of the divine envoys stopped, the great guardian spoke. Everyone, after the incident in the divine glacier mine, the frozen martial monarch has been investigating the cause. However, he still hasn't found the result of the investigation and is unable to find the culprit behind the scenes. Our God Bestowment Mountain and the divine glacier mine are both forces under the divine master. Everyone has equal status. Therefore, it's not good for me to ask the frozen martial monarch in detail, and it's even more impossible for me to interfere in this matter. What we need to do is to send a group of divine servants to the divine glacier mine as soon as possible. The divine envoys were all silent. They also understood the reason why the great guardian wanted everyone to keep it a secret. If this matter were to spread out, those divine servants who were to be sent away would definitely rather die than obey. After a moment of silence, Hong Qingtian suddenly asked, "Great Guardian, you said that the miners and divine servants died in a terrifying manner and the cause of death was mysterious and bizarre. Can you tell everyone how terrifying and bizarre it is?" The great guardian didn't hide anything and said truthfully, "Elder Hong, in the secret letter sent by the frozen martial monarch, he mentioned this point. According to him, those miners and divine servants who died tragically had all turned into dried corpses. They were like pitch-black charcoal, losing all their flesh and souls. Everyone died in a very painful manner, but before they died, there were no signs. The frozen martial monarch sent people to investigate, but they didn't find any traces of fighting." Hearing this, the divine envoys all sucked in a breath of cold air. Clearly, they were filled with shock. Such a miserable death is indeed terrifying. They died silently, and even the cause of death can't be investigated clearly. The culprit behind this must be an extremely savage expert. Since the matter of the glacier divine mine hasn't been resolved and the culprit hasn't been found, aren't we sending a group of divine servants to their deaths? The great guardian said with a solemn tone, "I am the same as everyone here. I have the same worries and worry about this. However, we can only do our part well. As for the disciples ranked outside of the top 50, even if they are sent to the glacier divine mine, that is their fate. Whether they live or die, and what their future will be like, will depend on their own fortune." Speaking up to here, Hong Qingtian and the divine envoys all sighed helplessly. Not long after, everyone's secret conversation ended. The great guardian and the divine envoys all left the Heaven Saint Palace's western court. Ji Tianqing listened to everyone's secret conversation and was also filled with doubts. His expression was grave as he pondered. Something happened at the glacier divine mine. A large number of miners and divine servants died mysteriously, and there was a shortage of manpower. Therefore, God Bestowment Mountain held a ranking battle a month in advance. The eliminated geniuses will be demoted to divine servants and sent to the glacier divine mine to fill the vacancies. However, why do the deaths of those miners and divine servants feel so familiar? You're tuning in to the Blee Maze Sword of Destiny YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.